Chapter 656. As she snuggled up to Ji Dong, Qin Sixuan's body pressed tightly against his. Sometimes she even thought that if Ji Dong never woke up, it might not be a bad thing for her to be with him like this forever. At least he wouldn't be in pain, and she would be able to accompany him like this. However, she knew that this was impossible. If she stopped Ji Dong from participating in the final battle, even if he knew that she was the flaming bar, he probably wouldn't forgive her. Perhaps this battle would be the end of everything. Qin Sixuan thought to herself. She knew that there would be an end to this holy battle no matter what. Ji Dong had already obtained all the top 10 famous wines, so he probably wouldn't wait any longer. At this thought, she couldn't help but hug Ji Dong's neck tightly and press her delicate face against Ji Dong's face. Even though he had been unconscious for so long, his face was still very clean. Every day, Qin Sixuan would wash his body thoroughly, and he looked as if he was asleep. Actually, she had tried to wake Ji Dong up a few days ago, but she hadn't done so. She didn't want him to wake up so soon. She knew that after he woke up, he wouldn't be able to be so intimate with her like this anymore. She struggled in her heart and thought of many possibilities, but in the end, she gave up on her idea. This was because she knew that if she really didn't wake him up from his deep sleep, he would definitely not forgive her when he woke up one day. However, she was selfish for once. She didn't wake him up immediately, but chose to stay here for a few more days so that she could accompany him for a few more days. If there was anyone in this world who knew when the Red Lotus heavenly fire would be extinguished, it would probably be Qin Sixuan. She had released the Red Lotus heavenly fire when she was still in the flaming bar. Even though she had suffered the impact of the 6 directions creation technique, her trace of consciousness was still able to sense the strength of the Red Lotus heavenly fire. Therefore, she could accurately know when the Red Lotus heavenly fire would disappear. Just as Tianji had said, there was less than a month left, but the exact date was unknown. But only she knew. She wanted to stay with Ji Dong for a few more days before the Red Lotus heavenly fire was extinguished. She wanted to quietly watch over him every day and serve him. Ji Dong, do you know how much I want to drink your cocktail again? Qin Sixuan said softly as her tears flowed uncontrollably. She really couldn't bear to part with him. She knew very well that if her final plan failed, then she and Ji Dong might never be able to be together again. The Holy Evil Island. Dark Fate stood quietly in front of the Red Lotus heavenly flame. His expression was very calm, so calm that it was a little strange. For some reason, Li Yonghao felt that the dark heavenly secrets seemed to have changed over the past few days. His emotions had become much gentler, and the original evil and tyrannical aura seemed to have disappeared a lot. Of course, he didn't dare to ask Darkness Tianji. However, he knew the outcome of the Darkness Death Guards. Although Darkness Tianji had never mentioned it, according to the news from the Heavenly Secret Alliance, the Darkness Death Guards had been completely annihilated. However, he didn't know the situation of the Darkness Death Guards. On this point, his judgment was similar to Darkness Tianji's. In a sense, the Darkness Heavenly Disciples were the disciples of the Darkness Death Guards. No one knew better than him how powerful the Darkness Death Guards were. He also had some understanding of the strength of the Darkness Heavenly Disciples. After killing the Darkness Death Guards, it was impossible for them to escape unscathed. Otherwise, they wouldn't have taken action for more than 8 months. However, Li Yonghao knew something that Darkness Tianji didn't know. The Darkness Heavenly Disciples weren't completely annihilated. This was because the Darkness Heavenly Disciples had sent the news to the Heavenly Secret Alliance about the annihilation of the Darkness Death Guards. They also told them that Darkness Tianji wouldn't care about their existence, so they could do whatever they wanted. Darkness Tianji only knew that the Heavenly Secret Alliance had occupied many cities, but Li Yonghao knew better. Perhaps it was because Darkness Tianji's oppressive rule had caused the people of the Darkness 5 Elements continent to suffer too much. The Heavenly Secret Alliance broke out without any scruples. In the beginning, it was just a spark. However, the Heavenly Secret Alliance had a good reputation among the people, and soon there was a huge response. The people of the Darkness 5 Elements continent could be said to have no way of making a living. They had reached the point where they would risk their lives for a bowl of porridge. In just a few months, more than one-third of the Darkness Five Elements continent had been controlled by the Heavenly Secret Alliance. Darkness Tianji's army was on the Holy Evil Island, and there was no effective force that could stop them. Now, more than 70% of the Darkness Five Elements continent was controlled by the Heavenly Secret Alliance. Although they were still far from complete domination, under such control, the Darkness Army at the front line couldn't receive continuous supplies at all. In other words, if they lost this holy war, Darkness Tianji will be done for. However, under such circumstances, Li Yonghao felt even more apprehensive. He didn't know if he should add insult to injury and cause the Darkness Army's defeat, or if he should assist the Dark Secrets divination in obtaining victory in the Holy War. If the Darkness Army was defeated, it would be best if Darkness Tianji died. Then, the entire Darkness Five Elements continent could be said to be under his control. However, if that happened, would the Radiant Five Elements continent let go of such a rare opportunity? They could take advantage of the situation and attack the Darkness Five Elements continent. Given the current situation of the Darkness Five Elements continent, what could they use to resist? When that time came, it was very likely that they would be ruled by the Darkness Army instead. This was definitely not what Li Yonghao wanted to see. However, if Darkness Tianji won this holy war, in the end, he was afraid that Ji Dong's words would come true. When the birds are gone, the fine bough is hidden. When the cunning rabbit is dead, the hound is cooked. He and the Darkness Heavenly Stem Saint would definitely not have a good ending. Fury's return made Li Yonghao's sense of crisis even stronger. If he were in Fury's shoes, he would also choose his son over the Darkness Heavenly Stem Saint King, who might threaten his rule. Therefore, these days, Li Yonghao's mood had been very conflicted. What he most hoped to see now was that both sides would suffer. When Darkness Tianji led the Darkness Army to almost defeat the Light Army, he would die. Only in this way could he logically take over the Darkness Army, and maybe he could even attack the Radiant Five Elements continent. Therefore, after thinking about it, Li Yonghao decided to take one step at a time. Everything would wait until the Holy War began. Then, he would pay attention to the development of the situation and make a decision. At most in half a month, the Red Lotus Heavenly Fire will be extinguished. I have waited for so many years, and this moment is finally coming. Darkness Tianji's voice woke Li Yonghao from his thoughts. He hurriedly said, Lord Tianji will definitely lead my Darkness Army to destroy the Light Army and unify the world. Darkness Tianji said indifferently, Have all the preparations been made? Li Yonghao nodded and said, Everything has been prepared. The army is under the command of the young master, and the Devil Army is also fully prepared. The Radiant Five Elements continent can't stop our progress. Darkness Tianji snorted coldly. Darkness will rule the entire world. Yonghao, I feel that you have been a little uneasy recently. Is there something wrong? Li Yonghao was startled and hurriedly said, Maybe it's because the holy war is about to begin. I'm a little nervous and excited. He Tianji turned around and glanced at Li Yonghao indifferently. This glance caused Li Yonghao's heart to palpitate. He Tianji's peak saint-level soul cultivation seemed to be able to project into the depths of his soul. Don't think too much. No matter what, you are my most capable subordinate. Darkness Tianji actually comforted him in a somewhat gentle manner. Li Yonghao couldn't help but feel a little flattered. Moreover, when he looked carefully, he found that Darkness Tianji's gaze didn't seem to be that sharp. Could it be that Lord Tianji had really changed his nature? Although Li Yonghao felt that it was a little strange, he wouldn't think that Darkness Tianji's personality had really changed just because of a relatively gentle sentence. He hurriedly said in fear and trepidation, This subordinate will do his utmost until the day I die. Darkness Tianji waved his hand, saying, Come, let's go back. Report dash. Right at this time, a somewhat hurried voice sounded. In the blink of an eye, a dark demon magician had already arrived in front of the two and knelt on the ground. Reporting to Lord Tianji, the Dark Fortress has just sent news that they were attacked. The warehouse, the warehouse. Darkness Tianji's eyes flashed sharply. What happened to the warehouse? The dark magician reported with a trembling voice. One of the stronghold's warehouses was destroyed. There was a strong enemy attack there. Darkness Tianji and Li Yonghao were startled at the same time. Li Yonghao solemnly said, "Could it be the radiant heavenly saints? They're not dead yet?" Yonghao, immediately lead the dark stem saints to the fortress and assume command there. Make sure that our supplies are no longer harassed. At the same time, mobilize the demon army to guard the fortress and transport all the supplies and armaments to the front lines. Li Yonghao hesitated for a moment before asking, "If it really is the radiant heavenly saints, what do we do?" He had no confidence in dealing with the radiant heavenly saints. Although he didn't know how many of them were left, the fact that they could kill all the Dark Death Guards was a huge shock to Li Yonghao. Those were the Dark Death Guards that had the support of the Dark Stem Divine Beast. Darkness Tianji coldly said, "Now is not the time to care about these light thieves. Once the Holy War starts, they will definitely come to the front lines. At that time, I will personally destroy them. Your mission this time is to ensure that all the supplies are transported to the front lines. When the Holy War starts, our army will have sufficient support." "Yes," Li Yonghao respectfully answered and immediately turned to leave. Watching Li Yonghao's figure disappear, Darkness Tianji actually revealed a trace of relief in his eyes for some reason. He turned around and continued to look at the red lotus heavenly flames. Just as Li Yonghao set off, the radiant heavenly saints who had just destroyed a warehouse in the Fortress of Darkness to replenish their supplies had retreated. After leaving Jidong, Darkness Tianji already had a plan. At this time, the red lotus heavenly flames had not been extinguished. Without Jidong's help, it was impossible for them to return to the Five Elements continent. Since that was the case, they had to harass the Dark Army to the end and cause as much damage as possible to the Dark Army. The more they achieved, the easier it would be for the Light Army when the Holy War started. There were originally 4 warehouses in the Fortress of Darkness. One had been destroyed by the Six Directions creation, and the supplies in the remaining 3 warehouses had long been transported to the front lines for the Dark Army's use. The Fortress of Darkness still served its purpose. In the next few months, the supplies that were transported from the country were stored here. After all, at the beginning, the resistance against Darkness Tianji could not effectively restrict the transportation of supplies from the rear. Therefore, they had accumulated a lot of supplies in the past few months. It barely filled up 2 warehouses and was used as a backup. This time, the main force that destroyed the supplies in the warehouses was not any one of the saints, but Emo. That's right, it was Emo. Without a doubt, when it came to destroying supplies, especially rations, fire magic masters had the greatest advantage. As for how they entered the warehouse, it was much simpler. With Lang Tianyi controlling the Pearl of Thick Earth, the group of saints sneaked into the warehouse without anyone noticing. As for which warehouse had supplies, it was naturally not a problem for them. With the rapid expansion of the resistance against Darkness Tianji, they were much more well-informed than before. Emma only had to go to the nearest city to obtain all the information they needed. After entering the warehouse, Darkness Tianji had originally asked Emma to directly set fire to the warehouse from the inside out. This way, by the time the enemy found out, the supplies in the warehouse would have been mostly burned. However, seeing so many supplies, Emma really could not bear to set fire to them. After all, there were so many civilians living in the Five Elements continent who were hungry and sleepy. After discussing with the saints, they used their storage magic tools to store as many supplies as possible, mainly food. Emma only started after they were all filled up. During this period of time, was no longer the cunning but weak little girl from before. After getting Chun Sichuan's confirmation, although the crystal crown of the Fuhua series of Darkness Death Guards was given to Ji Dong, the crystal core of the Darkness Serpent was given to Mo. In less than a year, Mo's cultivation could be said to have improved by leaps and bounds. She had already broken through 5 crowns. This was an achievement that even the saints of light heavens could not achieve at the same age. The corrosion of fire magic was extremely fast. When the guards here discovered it, the saints of light heavens immediately took action. Chapter 657. Only 2 purple-robed high priests were left in the Fortress of Darkness, and the Dark Demon Army only had 1,000 people. Of course, this was because the Red Lotus heavenly fire was about to be extinguished, and the Light Divinity holy disciples had come at the right time. With their strength, it was not a problem for them to fight these dark magicians head-on. Moreover, they only needed to resist and burn the resources in the warehouse. If not for the fact that Tianji prioritized stability and was afraid that Darkness Sky would arrive in time, the Light Divinity holy disciples might even have destroyed another warehouse. Even so, the number of dark magicians that died in their hands was more than 300, and not a single Darkness Crystal Crown was wasted. Jidong's method of nurturing war through war had long been deeply rooted in everyone's hearts, and was completely grasped by everyone. Light and the saints managed to escape unscathed. When they left the Dark Fortress, they didn't forget to use a few ultimate techniques. If it weren't for the fact that the 2 high priests in purple robes were smart enough to keep releasing demonic techniques to resist under the protection of the Dark Demon Army, their losses would have been even more severe. In order to express their sincerity in resisting the Tianji Alliance, and also because of Mo, after leaving the Fortress of Darkness, the Light Divinity holy disciples immediately sent the looted food to the nearby cities for the Tianji Alliance to deal with. At this moment, they received news from Lightning that the Dark Heavenly Stem holy disciples had already entered the Fortress of Darkness under Li Yonghao's leadership, and Li Yonghao had proposed to talk to the Light Divinity holy disciples. After leaving the city, Tianji and the others gathered to discuss Li Yonghao's intentions. Could this be a trap? Miao Miao asked this question. In fact, it was not just her. When the Light Divinity holy disciples heard that Li Yonghao wanted to meet them, their first reaction was the same. Seeing that the Red Lotus heavenly fire was about to disappear, and Li Yonghao had proposed to meet them at this time, they had to be cautious. Although Li Yonghao was the president of the Tianji Alliance, who knew if he would set up this trap with Dark Divinity to capture everyone in one fell swoop. If Jidong was here, they might still be able to put up a fight. However, without Jidong and Chun Sichuan, they had to be more cautious. Moreover, if Dark Fate came, he would have the support of the Dark Heavenly Stem Saint. It would be even more dangerous than when they faced the Dark Death Guards. Hearing Miao Miao's question, Du Exener immediately echoed, I also think it's a trap. We'd better be careful. This Li Yonghao definitely isn't up to anything good to see us. What do we have to talk about with him? Tianji, what do you think? Tianji glanced at the crowd and said in a low voice, I'm thinking if Jidong was here, what would he do in such a situation? Lang Tianyi said in a deep voice, back then, Young Lord once said that he would let Li Yonghao see the basis of our cooperation with them. Without a doubt, when we released the 6 directions of creation on the Holy Evil Island, this foundation was established. After we killed all the Darkness Death Guards and Darkness Heavenly Stem mythological beasts, our foundation became even more stable. Li Yonghao is the leader of the resistance against the Heavenly Secrets Organization. I'm afraid he's also in a dilemma right now. He definitely doesn't want Darkness Tianji to lead the Darkness Army to unify the entire world. If that's the case, it won't do him any good. What he wants the most is for both us and Darkness Tianji to suffer. Under such circumstances, it's unlikely that he'll help Darkness Tianji set up a trap to kill us, because it won't do him any good in his current situation. In terms of strength, after all, the Darkness Army is still above our Light Army. If we're gone, the balance of victory will be even more tilted. Therefore, I think that this shouldn't be a complete set. Lang Tianyi's analysis was clearly much more powerful than Miao Miao and Du Exiner's words just now. The radiant heavenly stem saints nodded their heads one after another. Indeed, from a theoretical analysis, if the radiant heavenly stem saints were to be completely wiped out, it wouldn't do Li Yonghao any good. If it wasn't for Fury, perhaps Li Yonghao would still have some hope for Darkness Tianji. However, Fury's appearance would definitely completely shatter his last hope. Darkness Tianji wasn't a fool. No matter how cold-blooded he would definitely choose his own son when choosing his successor, and not the darkness heavenly stemmed saints who might affect his rule. Yao Qianshu said, I also agree with Tianyi's words. The possibility of Li Yonghao ambushing us is very small. Moreover, don't forget that the Red Lotus heavenly fire could be extinguished at any time. Under such circumstances, the most important thing for darkness Tianji isn't us, but the holy war at the front lines. If I were him, I wouldn't leave the front lines for even a moment. I will be ready to fight at any time. Putting aside his peak saint-level strength, he's also the backbone of the entire darkness army. If he's not around when the war starts, it'll undoubtedly cause the morale of the darkness army to drop. Moreover, as long as the holy war starts, he's not afraid that we won't go to the front lines. Darkness Tianji can even abandon the darkness temple. At this important moment, when the holy war is about to begin, it's indeed unlikely that he'll specifically come to deal with us. Moreover, if I'm not wrong, he'll definitely calculate that we'll definitely suffer heavy losses because of the darkness death guards and won't be able to stir up any trouble. Therefore, I think we should go see Li Yonghao. Tianji, you make the decision. The eye of Tianji quietly appeared from between Tianji's brows. A light flashed and disappeared. Tianji nodded slowly and said in a low voice, Let's go. Through the senses of his soul, he could roughly predict the fortune and disaster of this trip. The outcome was obviously good. A day later, in a tavern in the city closest to the darkness fortress, the light heavenly dry saints waited quietly. They'd arrived very early, relying on the relationship they'd formed with the Heavenly Secret Alliance, as well as the large amount of food they'd gifted this time and their relationship with them. They've been able to obtain accurate information and come to this meeting point in advance. Even though they couldn't set up an omnidirectional transportation formation here, because they didn't have Jidong and Chun Sichuan, they'd more or less gained a certain understanding of the surrounding situation. They'd also made some arrangements. After all, the current light heavenly dry saints were all 9 crowns powerhouses. Their cultivation wasn't something an ordinary 9-crown devil master could compare to. The advantage of the heavenly dry saints made their magic power much more condensed than ordinary devil masters. As long as it wasn't Tianji leading all the dark heavenly dry saints here, they had nothing to fear. They're here. Tianji's eyes moved slightly. The light heavenly dry saint's gazes also sharpened at the same time. Footsteps sounded from outside the tavern. Li Yonghao, wearing a black cloak that even covered his head, strode in and sat directly in front of Tianji. What surprised the light heavenly dry saints was that Li Yonghao had come alone. He didn't bring any dark heavenly dry saints. Not only did he not bring them to the tavern, he didn't even bring them into the city. You seem very confident, sir, Tianji said lightly. Li Yonghao's gaze swept across, and a trace of surprise appeared in his eyes. He didn't expect that there would be so many light heavenly dry saints in front of him. The information given to him by the Heavenly Secret Alliance didn't mention the specific number of light heavenly dry saints. However, he quickly relaxed, because he didn't see Ji Dong among the crowd. Didn't Ji Dong come? Li Yonghao asked calmly. Tianji said, I can represent him fully. He has his own things to do. The holy war is about to begin. I think we'll all be holding back. Li Yonghao's eyes moved slightly. He looked straight at Tianji as if he wanted to see the secrets deep in his heart. Unfortunately, it was impossible to get what he wanted to know from Tianji, whose soul cultivation was much higher than his. Did Ji Dong die in the battle with the Darkness Death Guards? This thought lingered in Li Yonghao's mind, and his heart couldn't help but waver. If Ji Dong was really dead, it would be detrimental to his plan. In his opinion, only Ji Dong could lead the light heavenly dry saints to fight against Dark Tianji. I think we don't have to talk anymore. As he spoke, Li Yonghao stood up and was about to walk out. Tianji did not stop him. He just quietly watched him walk out. The other radiant heavenly saints all had questioning looks in their eyes. Although Li Yonghao was strong, the overall strength of the radiant heavenly saints was not something that the dark heavenly saints could compare to. With their cultivation, as long as they attacked with all their strength, Li Yonghao would not be able to escape. Li Yonghao walked to the door, but he didn't hear any sound behind him. He didn't even sense any mana waves. Although he had his back to the light, heavenly dry saints, he was extremely cautious and had been carefully sensing the changes behind him. Li Yonghao stopped and turned to look at Tianji. He found that Tianji was also looking at him calmly. I need Ji Dong to be present. He's still alive, and he's the basis for our cooperation. He has already shown me the foundation of your cooperation. However, if he's not around, I think any plan is meaningless. I'm afraid all of you are aware of this. Hearing Li Yonghao's words, Tianji slowly stood up and raised his right hand to press on his forehead. Li Yonghao could clearly see the eye of Tianji appearing. Tianji said solemnly, I swear in the name of Tianji that the light heavenly dry, Saint King Ji Dong, is still alive, and his strength has increased. If there's any falsehood in my words, let the light heavenly dry, Saint King, overturn. In an instant, a golden ray of light shot out of the eye of Tianji. It disappeared into the sky in a flash. Li Yonghao was a knowledgeable person, so he naturally recognized that it was a contract oath. It was impossible for an ordinary wizard to make such an oath. Moreover, this oath had come from the mouth of the light heavenly dry saint. Even though he did not have a powerful cultivation base, he was equivalent to darkness Tianji in the light and darkness continents. Li Yonghao had no choice but to believe him. In reality, Tianji's oath was meaningless. Ji Dong was indeed still alive, and his cultivation base was much stronger than before. The problem was that Ji Dong had not woken up when they left. His oath did not mention anything about Ji Dong participating in the sacred war. It could be said to be a word game, but it was a word game that Li Yonghao had no choice but to believe. Looking at Tianji, Li Yonghao's gaze finally changed. The rigid lines on his face softened significantly. He nodded and said, If that's the case, I believe that we have a basis for peace talks. Everyone should know that as a member of the Five Elements Continent of Darkness, I don't wish for the Five Elements Continent of Darkness to be ruled by the Five Elements Continent of Light. Therefore, no matter what, I can't help you fight against the Army of Darkness. We are rebelling against the Fekta Alliance. We are rebelling against the darkness of the Fekta Alliance. Even though we are all humans, from a certain perspective, we belong to different races. Therefore, I have two preconditions for peace talks with you. First, the basis for peace talks must at least ensure the safety of the Five Elements Continent. Second, Darkness Tianji must die. Only with his death can I use the resources in my hands to unify the Five Elements Continent and improve the current situation where the people have no way to live. I can first show my sincerity. There is still a warehouse in the Fortress of Darkness with military equipment and provisions. This time, Darkness Tianji sent me here to transport these things to the front line. However, I can let you empty the warehouse. Of course, it must be used to support the people who are suffering in the resistance against the Tianji Alliance. And the sincerity you have to show me is to kill Darkness Tianji. As long as Darkness Tianji is dead, everything will be much simpler. With the power of the Five Elements Holy Disciples and the power of the Darkness Holy Disciples, with the 20 artifacts of the Light and Darkness Holy Disciples, it is completely possible for us to recreate the situation on the Holy Evil Island during the first generation of Holy Disciples. Perhaps our strength is not as good as the first generation of Holy Disciples, but the Holy Evil Island is ready-made. It is not too difficult to create a formation like the one on the Holy Evil Island. Our Five Elements Continent and your Five Elements Continent will be separated, and peace will reappear on our two continents. We can also avoid the deaths of countless civilians. As for what will happen in the future, we do not know. But for the current generation of Holy Disciples, this is the best we can do. At this point, Li Yonghao paused for a moment before continuing in a deep voice. This is the sincerity I can show. I believe everyone can feel my sincerity. Please consider it carefully. Li Yonghao's eyes were filled with sincerity as he stared at Tianji. This darkness heavenly stem, Saint Monarch, seemed to be extremely sincere, just like what he said. Tianji quietly looked at Li Yonghao and slowly nodded. Your Excellency is indeed very sincere, but how can we guarantee that you will keep your promise after we kill Darkness Tianji? Chapter 658. Although Tianji's eyes were not as sharp as Li Yonghao's, they were more profound. Can you still keep your promise? As soon as he asked this question, his temperament seemed to have changed. Li Yonghao said indifferently, I want to show you my sincerity, not my promise. I've never believed in promises. I only believe in strength. You don't have Ji Dong's boldness. If it were Ji Dong, he wouldn't have asked me this question. He would only use his actions and strength to prove that I won't have the chance to violate the rules. Tianji frowned at Li Yonghao's frankness. The point was that Li Yonghao was right. In terms of boldness, he was far inferior to Ji Dong. Master, you must wake up. Without you, the Saints of Light would no longer be the Saints of Light. Although Tianji thought so, he didn't want to lose out. He said in a deep voice, In that case, we will do as you say. We are also very sincere. However, the final outcome is not something that we can guess right now. Everything will have to wait until we truly reach that day. Li Yonghao nodded slowly. Okay, we will wait for that day to come. Take care. After saying this, he turned around and disappeared from everyone's sight in the blink of an eye. Li Yonghao had only stayed for a very short period of time. Actually, both sides understood each other's answer. It was hard to say how the Holy War would turn out. If the Holy Apostles were really able to kill dark secrets when the time came, then perhaps there was a possibility of cooperation. However, if they wanted to achieve what Li Yonghao had said, they would have to kill He Tianji and have their strength equal. Only then would they be able to do what the first generation of holy disciples had done, and use the power of the holy disciples to rebuild the holy evil island. But was it really that easy to achieve this balance? However, Li Yonghao's arrival at least told the Light Sky Saints one thing, and that was that Li Yonghao and his Dark Sky Saints would most likely not help either side while they were dealing with the Dark Sky Saints. Without the support of the Dark Heavenly Stem Saints, Dark Tianji would be isolated and helpless. Obviously, it would be much easier to deal with him. Of course, even so, he was still a peak saint-level expert. His overall strength was not that easy to contend with. On the second day after the two sides met, the saints once again visited the Dark Fort. But this time, they came with a lot more secrets. Li Yonghao replaced the people guarding the last warehouse with his own. It didn't take much effort. The saints relied on the storage magic tools provided by the mysterious alliance to empty the last warehouse. With this amount of food, it would be enough to save a large number of destitute civilians in the Five Elements continent. In terms of governance, whether it was Li Yonghao or Shan Yu and his son who had rebelled against the Heavenly Secrets Alliance, they were many times better than the Dark Heavenly Secrets Alliance. After taking control of a large portion of the Darkness continent, the Heavenly Secrets Alliance began to effectively organize the people to engage in production and farming, doing all they could to ensure that they could barely fill their stomachs during this period of time. As long as they waited for the new batch of food to arrive, the famine in various parts of the Darkness continent would be effectively suppressed. Of course, there was still a long way to go before the Five-Element continent could recover its vitality. Li Yonghao and the Saints were not in a hurry to return to the front line. Instead, they sent a message to the Dark Heavenly Secrets Alliance. In the process of the Saints coming to rescue the Dark Fort, the last warehouse of the Dark Fort had been emptied. The remaining people of the Saints were more than they had imagined. The Dark Heavenly Secrets Alliance was leading the Saints to hunt them down with all their might, hoping to get rid of these anomalies. Li Yonghao's plan could be said to be flawless. Most importantly, the Holy War was about to begin, and it was impossible for the Dark Heavenly Secrets Alliance to leave the front line to check on the specific situation at the Dark Fort. Through the Heavenly Secrets Alliance, he told the Saints that they wouldn't appear on the battlefield during the early stages of the Holy War. He told the Saints to hurry up. Such a piece of news was enough for the Saints. However, they couldn't feel happy at all because their Holy King still hadn't returned. The Red Lotus Heavenly Fire was still burning quietly, but at this moment, the entire Evil Saint Island was in a state of mutual hostility. No one knew when the Red Lotus Heavenly Fire would be extinguished, but everyone knew that once the Red Lotus Heavenly Fire was extinguished, the Holy War would break out. At that time, it wouldn't be as simple as a massacre. everyone would fall into this war. The evil Saint Island was also destined to become a huge meat grinder. The key to the outcome of the Holy War would also lie in this. It could be said that whoever emerged victorious in this battle would be the winner. The center of the world seemed to have been completely gathered on the evil Saint Island. The night air was very refreshing. Ever since the myriad thunderbolts purgatory realm disappeared, the environment of the evil Saint Island had become much better than before. It was sunny almost every day. Even when it rained, the sun was still high in the sky. This was all because of the Red Lotus heavenly fire. No dark clouds could form above the evil Saint Island. The gorgeous red fire curtain had become a lot dimmer than before. Through the fire curtain, one could even see some blurry scenes on the opposite side. The demonic power of the ultimate killing move was finally about to be exhausted. The fluctuation of fire elements in the air obviously became more intense, and there was a layer of faint red halo in the sky. This strange scene attracted the attention of both sides. Although it was night, the Light Army had already started to take action. Tens of thousands of Dark Masters appeared on the battlefield. They were in groups of 10 and lined up neatly. Facing the Red Lotus heavenly fire, they put one hand on the shoulder of the person in front of them, and the 5-element cycle began to be activated. The phenomenon of the Red Lotus heavenly fire was undoubtedly telling everyone that it was going to change. The Dark Army naturally wouldn't be calm. Darkness Tianji stood quietly at the very front. He was the only one there. Fury stood beside him, facing the Red Lotus heavenly fire. Behind him were tens of thousands of Dark Demon soldiers. Although the Light Army had done a lot in the 5 Elements continent, at this moment, there were still more than 40,000 Dark Demon soldiers gathered around Darkness Tianji, and there were more than 100,000 reserve Dark Demon soldiers in the rear. Heavy armored legions with sophisticated war weapons formed a solid phalanx. In a short time, the armies of both sides had begun to prepare for battle. Buzz, the Red Lotus heavenly fire, suddenly trembled violently, and a layer of wave-like light spread from the bottom to the top. The intense red light illuminated the entire evil island in an instant, but it also rose slowly like a huge curtain. The strong fire elements fluctuated in the air, driving away the other attributes of magic elements. The ultimate killing technique that had been blocking the evil island for more than 4 years finally turned into a red cloud and floated in the air, illuminating the evil island and making the barrier between the two sides disappear. Whether it was the Light Army or the Dark Army, the moment the Red Lotus heavenly fire disappeared, no one acted rashly. Both sides raised their heads at the same time, watching the red halo spread in the air. The two of them finally saw each other's faces clearly. Killing intent surged out like monstrous waves. Even the killing intent of the god of massacre, Shupness, couldn't be compared to the millions of Dark and Light Army in front of them. Both sides had more than 3 million troops on the battlefield. The Light 5 Elements continent actually had more because they had a large number of logistical supplies. In this aspect, the Light 5 Elements continent originally had a lot of logistical supplies. It was just that the 6 Directions creation technique had destroyed the 6 warehouses of the evil island, along with the disappearance of millions of logistical supplies. If one looked down from the sky, they could clearly see that the Light Army and the Dark Army were clearly separated, just like 2 completely different worlds. On the side of the Light Army, most of the place was empty, without any plants. On the other hand, on the Dark Army's side, apart from the army, there was only endless green. The 6 Directions creation. Everything was brought about by the 6 Directions creation. The atmosphere in the open space between the two sides was so tense that it seemed like water was about to drip out. The mana condensed by both sides was increasing exponentially, and the momentum began to deviate from the equilibrium. The Light Army was clearly being suppressed. The mana fluctuations in the air of the Dark Army were much greater, and that kind of overwhelming pressure made the Light Army feel suffocated. The commander-in-chief of the Light Coalition Army, the Prince of Equality, stood at the front of the army with an ugly expression, and even his breathing was a little unstable. It was not just him, But all the generals around him and the powerhouses of the Dark Master Alliance's Elders Association felt their heartbeats quicken. Not to mention them, no one present had ever encountered such a situation where millions of troops were confronting each other before. This kind of atmosphere was not comparable to the confrontation between the Dark Masters at all. It could be said that at this moment, they were all immersed in a kind of magnificent pressure. Such a grand scene made everyone a little dazed. The same situation was also happening on the Five Elements continent side, which was also an important reason why neither side made a move after the disappearance of the Red Lotus Heavenly Fire. To put it bluntly, they were all in a daze. That's right, millions of troops were in a daze. It sounded a little hard to imagine, but it was the truth. It was just that the millions of troops on their side might not feel much during their daily training. But when the millions of troops were confronting the millions of troops of the enemy, when the tens of thousands of Dark Masters on the battlefield were in a state of gathering mana, who dared to say that they could still remain calm? The sound of rapid breathing almost spread throughout the entire battlefield, and everyone was in a similar state. The red light in the sky gradually faded, but the fire element became more and more intense. The absolute advantage in numbers and levels of mana meant that the Dark Masters on both sides were suppressing each other without any suspense. Although the tens of thousands of Dark Masters on the Five Elements continent side were using the Five Elements mutual generation and circulation formation created by Ji Dong, the other side's Dark Masters were 4 times more than theirs. Moreover, the Dark Masters on the Five Element continent side even had 2 or 3 crowns. On the Five Elements continent side, the 40,000 Dark Masters were all above 4 crowns. This was no longer a difference of 4 times. In terms of individual combat power, it could be said that the overall strength of the Dark Five Elements continent's Dark Masters was almost 10 times that of the Five Elements continent's Dark Masters. This did not even take into account the high-level Dark Masters on both sides, as well as Dark Tianji, who was a peak Saint-level powerhouse. Ji Yunqing's hand was already slowly raised. This situation could not continue. If the opponent's mana suppression advantage became more and more obvious, he was afraid that the tens of thousands of Dark Masters on his side would be completely overwhelmed by the opponent's momentum before the battle even began. This was not the result he wanted to see. At this moment, a sharp whistle sounded not far from Ji Yunqing's side. The battlefield of more than 6 million troops on both sides was originally extremely calm, but this sudden sound could not help but attract the attention of both sides at the same time. A green light rose from behind Ji Yunqing into the sky, and the rich life aura seemed to make the huge fire element in the air even more intense. Immediately afterward, the sky on the Five Elements continent side suddenly became extremely bright. One after another, huge figures quietly emerged in the sky. A total of 10 huge figures rose high in the sky. They were the 10 divine beasts of the Light Five Elements continent. The first would divine beast Azure Dragon. The second would divine beast Six Harmonies. The third fire divine beast Vermilion Bird. The fourth fire divine beast Flying Serpent. The fifth earth divine beast Sky. The sixth earth divine beast Tiani. The seventh metal divine beast White Tiger. The eighth metal divine beast Tyene. The ninth water divine beast Empress. And the 10th water divine beast Black Tortoise. The aura of the 10 divine beasts instantly formed a huge, colorful light curtain in the sky. They were not only powerful divine beasts whose cultivation was second only to the saint level, but also the totem symbols of the 10 divine beasts of the Light Five Elements continent. The moment they appeared, it seemed that the Five Elements continent behind the entire light army responded. The suppressed light magic masters were all in high spirits. Feeling the aura of the 10 divine beasts, they instantly raised their own mana to the limit, no longer being affected by the opponent's Dark Demon army. Fury, who was standing next to Dark Tianji, clearly saw the corner of Dark Tianji's eye twitch. There was no doubt that if the divine beasts of the Darkness divine beasts could appear at this time, the previous overwhelming situation would still be maintained. However, could the divine beasts of the Darkness divine beasts still appear? Chapter 659. Seeing that the heavenly stem divine beast had appeared above the Radiance army, The momentum of both sides had returned to a balanced state. Without exception, the Dark Demon Army also looked up at their own sky. Of course, they hoped that at this time, the heavenly stem divine beast could also appear the same time and confront the heavenly stem divine beast. Although the strength of the heavenly stem's divine beast was nothing compared to Saint-grade powerhouses like Darkness Tianji and the Dragon Emperor, the 10 heavenly stems divine beasts were totems of various elements. Their existence was symbolic. Unfortunately, the dark heavenly stem divine beasts would never appear again. They had already perished in the battle against the radiant heavenly stem saints. At this moment, it could be seen how much effort the saints had put in over a year in the Five Elements continent. If the Dark Death Guards were to appear on the battlefield, riding the dark heavenly stem divine beasts, the dark mages of the Five Elements continent would probably be annihilated in a short period of time once the war broke out. As time passed, disappointment and bewilderment began to appear in the Dark Demon Army. The dark heavenly stem, mythological beast they were looking forward to never appeared. Looking at the divine beast, the Dark Demon Army, which was initially full of confidence, began to feel emotional instability. If it weren't for Dark Fate standing at the forefront, the panic in their hearts would have been even more severe. After all, this was a battle of life and death between two mainlands. Under such circumstances, if the divine beast of the Dark Stem was still around, how could it not appear? The purpose of the heavenly stem divine beast's existence was to protect the continent. Even without the Darkness Death Guard's contract, the Darkness heavenly stem divine beast would definitely appear and fight to the death with the light heavenly stem divine beast. Not only did the Dark Demon Army feel strange, even the Radiant's Five Elements continent side felt strange. Chrysanthemum Pig's voice sounded in the ears of the leaders of the Radiance faction. Strange. Why didn't the dark heavenly stem divine beast appear? They couldn't have all been killed, right? At this moment, the Chrysanthemum Pig's green figure and a figure shining with faint golden light suddenly appeared in a flash and appeared in front of the Prince of Equality, Ji Yunshin. Their gazes turned solemn at the same time. But very quickly, a hint of relief and even more surprise appeared. The green figure was the Chrysanthemum Pig, while the golden figure was the Dragon Emperor. At the same time, they felt a wave of magical fluctuations coming from underground. Moreover, the target was the Equality King. Hence, they immediately dashed out. He stood in front of Ji Yunsheng to prevent any accidents from happening. However, they soon discovered that this sudden aura had light fluctuations and was definitely not a sneak attack from the Dark Demon Army. Don't do anything. He's one of us. The Dragon Emperor yelled, calming the experts behind him. Subsequently, a total of 9 figures emerged from the ground in front of everyone. Their bodies were enveloped in a layer of misty yellow light, causing even the Dragon Monarch's expression to change. Even he was surprised by the intense earth element fiend energy. A bright yellow bead flashed, and the yellow light quietly dissipated, revealing the 9 figures that rose from the ground. Standing at the front was Light Tianji, and behind him were Light First Wood Saint Disciple Yao Qianshu, Light Fifth Earth Saint Disciple Lang Tianyi, Light Sixth Earth Saint Disciple Miao Miao, Light Seventh Metal Saint Disciple Du Exener, Light Eighth Metal Saint Disciple Ajin, Light Ninth Water Saint Disciple Du Ming, Light 10th Water Saint Disciple Lon Bauer, and Mo who had returned with them. The appearance of these 9 figures caused all the higher-ups of the Army of Light to reveal a look of ecstasy in their eyes, even though most people did not recognize them. However, apart from Tianji and Mo, everyone else had the 9 crowns of Yin Yang above their heads, as well as their incredibly powerful auras and the god artifacts in their hands. It was easy to guess where these people came from. You guys. The Dragon Monarch looked at the crowd in a daze. Who would have thought that the Radiant's divine disciples would be able to appear here in time when the battle between the two sides was about to break out? There is no doubt that this would greatly boost the overall strength and morale of the Radiant's army. Tianji smiled and nodded at the Dragon Monarch. Greetings, Your Majesty Dragon Monarch. There is no need to be confused. The dark heavenly stem divine beasts will never appear again, because they have already been killed by us along with Dark Tianji's right-hand men, the Dark Death Guards. As soon as these words came out, everyone was even more shocked. The originally suppressed emotions were immediately swept away. There were more than a dozen nine-crowned demon masters in the Light Army, but they were completely different from the light heavenly stem saints in front of them. Although they were all from the Radiance 5 Elements continent, the Radiance Divine, Disciples, aura fluctuations were much stronger than ordinary nine-crowned supreme beings after their cultivation base had been raised to the level of nine-crowned supreme beings. No nine-crowned supreme being could possibly be a match for the Radiance Divine Disciples if they were at the same level. This was also the reason why the Dragon Monarch was shocked when Lang Tianyi used the Pearl of Thick Earth to emit the Earth Demonic Power Fluctuation. The Dragon Monarch's gaze swept across the Radiance Divine Disciples in front of him. He could accurately determine the current level of their current strength. He said in surprise, "You guys were actually able to raise your cultivation base to the level of 9 crown in such a short period of time. It seems that a large number of Dark Devil Masters have died in your hands." As a martial sage expert, his insight was naturally incomparable to ordinary people. He immediately pointed out the reason why the Radiance Divine Disciples' cultivation base had improved by leaps and bounds. However, the Dragon Monarch's gaze soon froze, and he said in a deep voice, "Where are Ji Dong and Chen Xishuan? Also my children?" Tianji smiled and said, "Your Majesty Dragon Monarch, please don't be impatient. Ji Dong and Xishuan are fine, and your children are also very healthy. Sidong is about to hatch. They have a more important mission and will arrive later." Upon hearing that his children were fine, the Dragon Monarch immediately became spirited. A loud and clear dragon roar rang out from his mouth, and a strong demonic power fluctuation rushed into the sky. In an instant, the 300 adult dragons that followed him rose into the sky from behind the Radiance Army. These were 300 rank 10 dragons. Individually, they might not be a match for the 9-crowned Devil Masters. However, these rank 10 powerhouses were originally at the same level as the 9-crowned human powerhouses. It could be said that the 300 adult dragons that the Dragon Monarch brought could almost compete with tens of thousands of Light Devil Masters. When such a powerful force appeared in midair, the suppression between the two sides immediately reversed. Whether it was the sudden appearance of the Radiance Divine Disciples, or the 300 dragons and the Radiance Divine Beasts in the sky, they all raised the morale of the entire Radiance Army to the peak. Ji Yinsheng shouted, "Air Force, take off!" All the Devil Masters above the level of 6 crowns who had flying magical beasts. They rode on their respective magical beasts and rose into the sky at the same time. They surrounded the 300 dragons in a semicircle formation, and the battle aura became even more intense in an instant. There were not many air forces on the side of the Radiance Army, only 500 people. Because more people had to release the 5-element cycle formation, not all the Devil Masters with flying magical beasts participated in the Air Force. However, the 300 dragons were too imposing. When they released their aura, it was overwhelming, and that kind of terrifying demonic power fluctuation would make anyone tremble. "Father, what should we do?" Seeing that the aura of the Radiance Army was getting stronger and stronger, Fury's expression did not change, and he asked Darkness Tianji in a low voice. At this time, Fury's mood was actually very complicated. As a spy, of course, he hoped that the Radiance Army would win the final victory. However, no matter how bad Darkness Tianji was, he was still his father who was related by blood. It was easy to say that justice should be put before family, but it was not so easy to do it. At this time, Fury's mood was fluctuating because of this. Darkness Tianji looked very calm, and at this time, he did not have his usual tyranny. He said faintly, "Air Force, take off." This was the first order that Darkness Tianji issued after the Red Lotus heavenly fire disappeared. The Dark Demon Army, whose momentum had been suppressed by the Radiance Army, suddenly seemed to be injected with chicken blood when they heard this order. In an instant, in the huge formation of the Dark Demon Army, black square formations rose neatly into the sky. The momentum that was originally suppressed actually moved with them as they rose into the sky. The reason was very simple. The number of air forces of the Dark Demon Army had reached 6,000. A total of 6,000 cultivators with a cultivation of more than 6 crowns. And devil masters with flying magical beasts. The number was more than 10 times that of the Radiance Army. Although there were 300 dragons on the side of the Radiance Army, they could not gain the slightest advantage in the air. If the Dark Stem Divine Beasts were still there at this time, there was no doubt that the air force of the Radiance Army would not be able to compete at all. This was not the end. With Darkness Tianji's order, deep roars sounded from the rear of the Dark Demon Army, and huge figures gathered together like dark clouds. The huge figures flew directly above the height of the air force of the Dark Demon Army and appeared at a higher level. There were also giant dragons. The giant dragon in the lead was a terrifying 70 meters long. Its entire body was as black as ink, and it exuded a black aura that did not belong to the 5 elements. On its head, there was a golden crown that shone with black light patterns. There were thousands of dragons following behind it. In addition to the 5 types of dragons that belonged to the 5 elements, there were also some black dragons like the dragon in the lead. There were only about 30 black dragons, but their destructive aura was something that the other dragons could not hope to match. On the side of the Radiance Army, the Dragon Emperor's expression changed, and he said in a deep voice, "Dark Dragon Emperor, the power of the entire race." Yes, the number of dragons in the Radiance Continent and the Darkness Continent was always about the same. Perhaps because the dragons were too innately powerful, their reproductive ability was very poor. Apart from the time when they had a dominant position in the beginning, under normal circumstances, it was already quite good to have thousands of clansmen. The Light Dragon Emperor had brought all the elites of the Dragon Clan, including all the adult dragons. However, the Dark Dragon Emperor that appeared above the Darkness Army was even more thorough. He had actually brought the entire Dark Dragon Clan. Just like how Darkness Tianji had used the power of the entire continent to create this Darkness Army, he was equally decisive. The appearance of the thousands of dark dragons immediately reversed the momentum of both sides. The Radiance Army, or at least the Air Force, had been completely suppressed by the other party. Even if they had the 10 great totem divine beasts, the overall strength of the Air Force was far inferior to the other party. Darkness Tianji sneered and said indifferently, "So what if I don't have the Dark Stem Divine Beasts? Do I need the Dark Stem Divine Beasts?" Fury, have Li Yonghao and the others not returned yet? Fury said in a deep voice, "I've already sent someone to pass down your orders. They should be back soon." A cold glint flickered in Darkness Tianji's eyes. He placed his hands behind his back and did not say anything else. At this moment, a low growl was heard from the Dark Dragon Emperor. "Light, do you dare to fight me? I have been waiting for this battle for 1,000 years. Ever since I listened to Darkness Tianji's plan 1,000 years ago. This holy battle will not only decide the ownership of the Radiance Continent and the Darkness Continent, but it will also decide whether the Light Dragon clan will be completely annihilated or if our entire clan will perish. You and I shall be the start of this holy war." The Light Dragon Emperor snorted angrily as his body turned into a golden ray of light and soared into the sky. "Darkness, do you think I'm afraid of you? Come on." As he spoke, the Light Dragon Emperor also shook his body and revealed his true form. Compared to the Dark Dragon Emperor, his body was clearly smaller. However, this was not because he was far weaker than his opponent, but because of the difference in race. The Darkness Dragon Clan had always been the largest and the most unique dragon clan. There was no such dragon clan in the Radiance 5 Elements mainland. Although the Dark Dragon Emperor was slightly larger in terms of body size, his cultivation was similar to the Light Dragon Emperor's. They were both at the peak of the initial level Martial Sage, but had yet to enter the intermediate level Martial Sage. The battlefield between the two sides was 25 miles wide. However, at this moment, Darkness Tianji and the Light Dragon Army's commander, the Prince of Equality, Ji Yunsheng, ordered their armies to slowly retreat a distance. Two great dragon emperors. This was a clash between two martial saints. Their battle would definitely be at the level of ultimate killing skills. Neither side wished for their side to be affected. The first battle between the two sides was a battle between martial sages. Without a doubt, whichever Dragon Emperor won would gain the upper hand. Tension filled the air between the experts on both sides. The battle between the two Dragon Emperors was about to begin. Chapter 660. The Light Dragon Emperor's entire body shone with a strange luster. It was no longer the transparent luster of a diamond dragon. The transparent body of a diamond dragon had an additional layer of golden halo. This was the holy light attribute, which was the opposite of the darkness Dragon Emperor's darkness attribute. Among the Light Dragon clan, only the Dragon Monarch possessed the pure holy light attribute. Unlike the Darkness Dragon clan, there was only a Darkness Dragon clan. There was no doubt that the Darkness Dragon race was more tyrannical than the 5 elemental races. However, it was also because they were outside of the 5 elemental races. Hence, if the 5 elemental races were stronger than the Darkness Dragon race, any element could restrain them. On the contrary, if the 5 elemental races were weaker than the Darkness Dragon race, any element would be countered by the Darkness Dragon race. Therefore, the Dark Dragon race was a very special existence. The two Dragon Emperors of Light and Darkness were like two miniature continents of light and darkness. At this moment, they were hovering in mid-air, facing each other, and the collision of their auras was the most direct. The two Dragon Emperors were 1,000 meters apart. However, the air between them constantly emitted some low, rumbling sounds. Neither of them used their demon domain. Just like the battle between human 9-crowned supreme beings, at their level, everything had been simplified. Fancy skills would not be of any use at all. The battle between them was the collision of the purest fusion of their bodies and mana. It was a true battle between saint-level beings. Gold and black light practically lit up at the same time. The two Dragon Monarchs' silhouettes practically shrunk at the same time. In that instant, they turned into their human forms at the same time, and the first rumble resounded in the sky. It was the two Dragon Monarchs' auras that caused a series of explosions in the air. Streaks of golden and black lightning could be clearly seen colliding and surging in midair. Terrifying mana waves blossomed in the air, and the release of every ray of mana caused the air to tremble violently. This wasn't the result of their attacks, but the clash of dragon might between them. The reason why he chose to transform into a human at the same time was very simple. It was because of the word compression. The same amount of mana in a dragon's body and a much smaller human's body would obviously have different concentrations. Moreover, their dragon monarch bodies were so huge, making them easy targets for their enemies. Therefore, they would rather give up their powerful bodies and transform into humans. This extreme battle was about to unfold in the blink of an eye, even though they were mortal enemies. However, at this moment, they displayed astonishing teamwork. They transformed into human forms at the same time and charged at each other at the same time. They were like two bolts of lightning, one black and one gold. Most of the spectating magicians only saw a blur before the two bolts of lightning collided in the air. There was no rumble. Only circles of golden and black halos burst forth in the sky. It wasn't that there was no sound when the two Dragon Emperors collided, but rather that the offensive power between them was simply too powerful. The sound produced by the collision of Saint-tier mana reached the level of joy after extreme sorrow. He could only faintly feel that the world was constantly trembling along with their battle. Everyone's gazes were focused on the sky, including Darkness Tianji. This battle was of utmost importance to both sides. This was especially true for the 5 Elements continent. The appearance of thousands of dark dragons dealt a huge blow to the morale of the Radiant's 5 Elements continent. Everyone could tell that the army of darkness was still far superior to the army of light. It wasn't just because of the number of magicians on both sides, but also because of the strict formation of the Dark Army's magicians. The accumulation of 10 generations of Darkness Tianji was definitely not comparable to the temporary arrangement of the 5 Elements continent's allied forces in the past few years. There was a trace of anxiety in Light Tianji's eyes. They had been in the 5 Elements continent for so long, but they didn't know that Darkness Tianji had the Dark Dragons. It could be said that they had achieved glorious achievements in the Five Elements continent. They had killed the divine beast of darkness, the Dark Death Guards, and almost destroyed the Darkness Temple. They had also killed tens of thousands of dark magicians and destroyed the logistics of the Dark Army. It could be said that they had been trying their best to weaken the strength of the Dark Army. But even so, the Dark Army was still able to display shocking power at the beginning of the Sacred War. It was still not something that the Army of Light could contend with. If the Light Dragon Emperor could win this battle, then the morale of their side would at least be boosted. Although there were only 300 light dragons, they were all adult dragons after all, and they could still fight against the opposing dragon race. The rest would depend on how much power the five elements, mutual generation, and circulation formation could exert. With all 9 of the Radiant Empire's holy disciples and the temporary absence of the Dark Heavenly Disciples, the Radiant Empire's army still had the upper hand in terms of the top powerhouses on both sides, if the Dark Heavenly Secret was not taken into account, at least for now. After all, Jidong had led the divine disciples of the Light Empire to kill many purple-robed high priests, and the other side had lost 10 Dark Death Guards. When is Jidong coming? The chrysanthemum pig was still in his usual small body. With a leap, he jumped onto Yao Qianshu's shoulder and asked Tianji. Tianji shook his head and said, "I don't know either." The chrysanthemum pig said anxiously, "You don't know? How can you not know? Has Jidong already reached the 9 crowns level? If so, as long as he can get there in time, with this pig's saint-ranked with attribute mana, it won't be impossible for him to withstand the darkness. This boy is the key. Only he can cooperate with me." The 5 divine beasts of the Holy Evil Island were all of yin and yang attributes. It was the yin-yang wood. If it cooperated with Jidong's yin-yang fire, it would naturally be able to exert its greatest power. Otherwise, it would be impossible for it to resist Darkness Tianji, who was at the peak of the saint level. Tianji said in a deep voice, "If Darkness Tianji makes a move later, we will deal with him together. Don't participate in the battle for the time being. Although Jidong and Xixin have not arrived, we should be able to stop him for the time being if we join forces." Of course, he had some background for saying this. Don't forget that he was also Tianji. Moreover, he was Light Tianji, the opposite of Darkness Tianji. Although he didn't have any direct combat power, in terms of restraining Darkness Tianji, even the Light Dragon Emperor couldn't compare to him. Just like the 2 Dragon Emperors who were fighting in front of him, he and Darkness Tianji were archenemies. As the commander-in-chief of the allied forces, Prince Pingding, Ji Yunsheng, had already recovered from the grand confrontation in front of him. He said in a deep voice, "Pass down my order. All evil masters, prepare the 5 elements yin-yang cycle formation. Turn to fire. Target the enemy's left flank, regardless of the outcome of the battle between the 2 Dragon Emperors. Once it is over, immediately launch the attack. At the same time, order the Diamond Corps, Annihilation Corps, and the other 5 corps to prepare for battle and assist our Air Force to deal with the enemy's Air Force. Elders, when the battle starts, I will have to trouble you. Your Excellency Chrysanthemum Pig, please inform the Heavenly Stem Divine Beasts to entangle Darkness Tianji." Chrysanthemum Pig and Tianji were stunned. They could understand Ji Yunsheng's first few orders, but this last one, it made them feel a little confused. Chrysanthemum Pig said, doubtfully, "Heavenly Stem Divine Beasts are strong, but they should not be comparable to the light Heavenly Stem Divine Disciples who have divine weapons and have reached 9 crowns. Their light attribute can restrain Darkness Tianji." Ji Yunsheng said, "It is precisely because they can restrain darkness that they can't simply attack Darkness Tianji. If the light Heavenly Stem Divine Disciples were all present, then they would have no problem dealing with Darkness Tianji. I will even get others to assist them and do their best to deal with Darkness Tianji and kill him. However, with the current situation of the light Heavenly Stem Divine Disciples, it is impossible to kill Darkness Tianji without Jidong as the core. Therefore, I hope to settle for the next best thing. I will rely on the light Heavenly Stem Divine Beasts with all their attributes to block Darkness Tianji and delay him from entering the battlefield. Then, I will use the powerful strength of the light heavenly stem divine disciples to kill as many experts as possible in the enemy's devil army. Now that the enemy's darkness heavenly stem divine disciples have not appeared, they also need the light heavenly stem divine disciples to resist. As for the Air Force, although we are at a disadvantage, the outcome of such a battle will not be decided in a short period of time. Coupled with the cooperation of the 5 Corps, there will be no problem for the time being. Considering the entire battlefield, the battle between the Devil Masters of both sides, especially the battle to restrain darkness Tianji, is the most important. Everyone, please follow my instructions. In this kind of battle, even Ji Dong would feel powerless, let alone Tianji. After all, they were not commanders of the army and had no experience in leading an army into battle. Hearing Ji Yunxing's words, Tianji nodded and said, "Everything will be as your highness said." Not to mention the fact that Ji Yunsheng was Ji Dong's grandfather. Just his calm and wise command was enough to make the light heavenly stem divine disciples admire him. Obviously, Ji Yunxing's arrangement was more reasonable. At this time, the battle between the 2 dragon emperors in the sky had reached a white-hot level. Black and gold constantly collided violently, and the spread of each layer of halo was caused by the collision between the 2 sides. Whether it was strength or combat skills, both sides were about the same. In this all-out collision, it was difficult for either side to gain the upper hand. Every time their bodies collided, it was a contest at the level of a super sure-kill skill. Only saint-level powerhouses like them could make their attacks and defenses reach this level. Ordinary 9-crown demon masters, even if they used a super sure-kill skill, they would need a long time to accumulate power, and it would consume a lot of magic power. This was saint-level. If saint-level powerhouses like them directly appeared on the main battlefield, it would definitely be a disaster. Fury had been standing beside Darkness Tianji, quietly observing him. For some reason, he felt that Darkness Tianji was a little strange today. All along, this sacred battle had been Darkness Tianji's greatest hope. He had been waiting for the arrival of this sacred battle. However, when the sacred battle really started, he seemed too calm. The appearance of the Dark Dragon clan did not surprise Fury at all. What was more, after the 2 dragon emperors started fighting, Darkness Tianji had not issued a single order. This was clearly abnormal. At this time, Darkness Tianji asked Fury, "Li Yonghao and the others have not returned yet?" Fury nodded and said, "Not yet." Darkness Tianji frowned and asked, "Why is it taking so long?" Vaguely, Fury suddenly felt that there was some anxiety in Darkness Tianji's mood, which made him even more puzzled. Although the Darkness Heavenly Stem Saint was not here, it should not have caused Darkness Tianji to feel this way. It should be known that on the current situation, the Darkness Army still had an overwhelming advantage. Darkness Tianji suddenly said, "Fury, go and deploy the troops. Before Li Yonghao returns, all the troops except the Darkness Demon Army will be under your command." It was not that he did not want to give the Darkness Demon Army to Fury, but Fury's prestige was not enough to command the entire Darkness Demon Army. Besides Darkness Tianji himself, only Darkness Heavenly Stem Saint Ruler Li Yonghao had this ability. Although Fury did not understand, he still nodded and turned to leave. In terms of commanding ability, he was indeed lacking compared to Li Yonghao. At this time, with such a great battle ahead, he could only temporarily put away the doubts in his mind. This was not a good time to make a move, no matter what. Moreover, it would undoubtedly be more advantageous for the Light Army if he controlled the Darkness Army. The Light Dragon Emperor struck out with his right palm and blocked the Dark Dragon Emperor's fist. At the same time, his body flashed and his right leg swept out like a battle axe. However, the Dark Dragon Emperor raised his left leg and knee outwards, blocking the attack route. Both sides had collided like this countless times, and each time there would be intense friction between the mana of both sides. Their cultivation was too similar, and their mana restrained each other. It could be said that no one could gain an advantage over the other. Under such circumstances, their mana consumption was rapid. They were both saint-rank powerhouses, and they were going all out in this kind of battle. Moreover, they were both so cautious, and they were competing in mana. Suddenly, the Light Dragon Emperor's body swayed, as if revealing a flaw. The Dark Dragon Emperor sneered inwardly. Can't hold it in anymore? How could I not see through such a simple plan to lure the enemy in? Although he thought so, he attacked without hesitation. After discovering the other party's goal, he was already prepared. He believed that he would definitely be able to gain the upper hand by exchanging blows. It was time to decide the outcome. Chapter 661. The Light Dragon Emperor had deliberately exposed a flaw in his right shoulder, but the Dark Dragon King had seen through it. However, the Dark Dragon King beat him at his own game and punched the Light Dragon Emperor's shoulder hard. The Light Dragon Emperor let out a muffled groan. He took advantage of the opportunity and turned around. His entire body suddenly curled up, as if he had shrunk a little. Then, he lightly patted the Dark Dragon Emperor's fist. The Dark Dragon Emperor had guessed this long ago. Although it was the first time they had met, they had a tacit understanding during this battle. The Dark Dragon Emperor had already guessed what the Light Dragon Emperor was going to do when he attacked. After all, if he were in the Light Dragon Emperor's position, he would also use this method to attack. If he could destroy the other party's fist at the risk of getting injured, he would very likely gain the upper hand. As Dragon Emperors, they all had sage-level physiques, and the shoulder was one of the hardest parts of the body. Hence, the Dark Dragon Emperor knew that his punch would only cause the Light Dragon Emperor minor injuries at most. If the Light Dragon Emperor really broke his arm, that would be a huge loss. However, the Dark Dragon Emperor had already predicted all of this. How could he let the Light Dragon Emperor succeed? Hence, after his punch landed, he retreated at lightning speed, and his right fist was only brushed slightly by the Light Dragon Emperor's palm. According to his estimation, he definitely wouldn't be injured under such circumstances. Although the Light Dragon Emperor wasn't seriously injured, it was enough to determine the outcome of this battle, since their strengths were so close. Even if they had to pay a heavy price to get rid of the Light Dragon Emperor, the Dark Dragon clan would definitely win today's battle. The Dark Dragon Emperor's calculations were correct, and his thinking was sound from a normal point of view. However, he had overlooked something. Why would the Light Dragon Emperor set up a luring tactic that wasn't too brilliant for the Dark Dragon Emperor to see through? Very soon, the Dark Dragon Emperor realized this, because the Light Dragon Emperor's palm had already brushed against his fist. This was only an extremely slight contact. Compared to their previous collision, it seemed so insignificant. However, it was this slight contact that changed the originally balanced situation of the battle. However, what happened next was not what the Dark Dragon Emperor had expected. When the Light Dragon Emperor's fingertip brushed against the Dark Dragon Emperor's fist, the Dark Dragon Emperor turned his body and seemed to have dodged the palm calmly. However, in the next second, his body froze for a moment as though it was frozen. Then his entire body flew backward and turned into a black bolt of lightning, retreating hundreds of meters in an instant. At their saint-level cultivation, moving was no different from teleportation. Among the spectators below, as long as their cultivation base was higher than 9 crowns, they could clearly see the battle in the sky. However, at this moment, neither side understood what was happening. The Dark Dragon Emperor clearly had the upper hand, so why didn't it follow up with another attack? Instead, it retreated rapidly? What was it doing? However, in the next second, everyone understood what had happened. With a loud boom, the Dark Dragon Emperor's left fist that had landed on the Light Dragon Emperor's shoulder had exploded. Blood splattered everywhere, and the blood splattered back to its original form in the air. A large number of dragon claws, scales, and flesh scattered in all directions. The Dark Dragon Emperor, who was in his human form, had his entire left hand blown off. How was that possible? The powerhouses on the Darkness Army's side were in disbelief. On the Light Army's side, although they were more ecstatic, the shock in their eyes was not much different from the Darkness Army's. Yes, no one believed that the Light Dragon Emperor had caused the injury on the Dark Dragon Emperor's hand. One had to know that they had maintained an almost equal strength in the previous battle. Furthermore, the Light Dragon Emperor had only brushed the edge of the Dark Dragon Emperor's fist with his palm after taking a blow from the Dark Dragon Emperor. They all had saint-level physiques, and were extremely powerful members of the dragon race. How could they suffer such a powerful injury just like that? Even the Dark Dragon Emperor did not understand how the Light Dragon Emperor had done it, let alone the spectators. At this moment, both parties were hundreds of meters apart, and the Light Dragon Emperor had no intention of chasing after him. Instead, he was panting slightly. The Dark Dragon Emperor's punch on his shoulder did not feel good either. At this moment, he took advantage of the Light Dragon Emperor's moment of shock to adjust his breathing. At the same time, the Light Dragon Emperor could not help but reveal a proud look on his face. "How did you do it?" The Dark Dragon Emperor quickly stopped his bleeding. However, there was no doubt that his combat power would be greatly reduced now that his left hand had disappeared. The Light Dragon Emperor snorted coldly. "You don't need to know. This is the difference in strength." The injury on his shoulder had been greatly reduced by the Light Dragon Emperor. How could he give the Dark Dragon Emperor such a rare opportunity to catch his breath? In a flash, the Light Dragon Emperor struck out with both hands at the same time. He was still as gentle as before. However, the Dark Dragon Emperor dared not clash head-on this time. He retreated rapidly and retreated to his own side. Although the Dark Dragon Emperor was eager to defeat the Light Dragon Emperor, it did not mean that he would risk his life for it, let alone when he was at a complete disadvantage. As the Light Dragon Emperor dashed towards the Dark Dragon Emperor, he thought to himself, "Ji-dong, thank you, Brad." In fact, in terms of pure strength, the Light Dragon Emperor and the Dark Dragon Emperor were almost on par. If the battle had continued, there would only be one outcome, and that was a lose-lose situation. The reason why the Light Dragon Emperor was able to defeat the Dark Dragon Emperor by surprise was that he had made use of the Dark Dragon Emperor's mentality, that he had figured out his plan. Another reason was the mystical effect of the palm strike, just now. That's right. The Light Dragon Emperor had used the deity strike that Ji-dong was most proficient in. Ji-dong had imparted the deity strike to his partners, but everyone, including Fury, could not break through the first level of cultivation. However, none of them, including Fury, could break through the first stage of their cultivation. As a result, Light and the other saints could not focus on practicing the deity Destroyer Strike. After all, they were not very good at close-range combat. Moreover, everyone had their own ways of compressing mana. For example, Ajin had the Demon Destruction Realm. If she used Ji-dong's deity strike, it would affect her own combat power. Ji-dong and the Dragon Emperor had sparred countless times. Towards the end, Ji-dong could already fight with the Dragon Emperor. The deity strike was the most troublesome thing for the Dragon Emperor. The compression of mana by the deity strike was not terrifying. What was terrifying was that it could inject mana into the opponent's body and then explode. Even the strong physique of the dragon race could not be immune to that, and the Light Dragon Emperor had suffered a lot because of that. Otherwise, given its sage-level cultivation, how could it have been forced into a draw by Ji-dong? Later on, a few days before Ji-dong left the Dragon Valley, Ji-dong taught the Dragon Emperor the principle and cultivation method of the deity strike. It was considered a repayment for the help the Dragon Emperor had given them all this while. The Dragon Emperor was very interested in the deity strike. After practicing hard, he mastered it very quickly. Of course, he could only unleash the power of the first level of the deity strike. However, that was enough for him. After all, he was a sage-level powerhouse. What he needed was not the ability to condense the deity strike, but the ability to inject mana into the opponent's body. With that ability, he would undoubtedly have a huge advantage when fighting against opponents of the same level. Previously, when the battle between the Light Dragon Emperor and the Dark Dragon Emperor started, both parties were very cautious. Moreover, their mana was at its peak at that time. The Light Dragon Emperor knew that even if it used the deity strike at that time, it could only gain a slight advantage at most. It could not really hurt the Dark Dragon Emperor. Therefore, it had been holding back and using its original ability to fight the Dark Dragon Emperor to a draw. The Dark Dragon Emperor fell for it. When they were fighting with all their strength, it could not have discovered the existence of such a skill of a Light Dragon Emperor. Under the Light Dragon Emperor's plan, the Dark Dragon Emperor punched the Light Dragon Emperor's shoulder. The Light Dragon Emperor had condensed all the deity strike's mana on his palm. It looked like a gentle sweep, but the deity strike had already taken effect. The Light Dragon Emperor had been accumulating power for a long time, and he had gone all out to compress and release it. That was why the Dark Dragon Emperor's palm was blown into pieces. The two Dragon Emperors, whose mana was on par, decided the outcome of the battle based on the external ability that the Light Dragon Emperor had learned. The Dark Dragon Emperor had lost a hand. He knew that he would not stand a chance, so he could only retreat at full speed. However, in the process of retreating, the Light Dragon Emperor's mana was affected because his hand was blown into pieces. Before he could retreat back to the main formation, he was caught by the Light Dragon Emperor. The Light Dragon Emperor struck the Dark Dragon Emperor's shoulder again. Although the Dark Dragon Emperor was prepared, the flesh on his shoulder was still blown into pieces by the power of the deity strike. It was the cooperation of the Dragon Kings under him and the Dark Dragons that forced the Light Dragon Emperor to retreat. Attack! Just as the Light Dragon Emperor rushed over with the Dark Dragon Emperor, the commander of the allied forces, Ji Yunsheng, also gave the order to attack. The Light Demon Master's 5 elements coexistence cycle formation was already ready. With Ji Yunsheng's order, nearly 1,000 dazzling red lights shot out and bombarded the flank of the Dark Demon Army. The Dark Demon Army was still paying attention to the battle between the two Dragon Emperors in the sky. Without Darkness Tianji's order, when they saw the Light Demon Masters suddenly attack, they were not prepared at all. Darkness Tianji's voice rang out, echoing through the air in a somewhat hurried manner. 5 elements barrier. Layers of multicolored 5 elements boundaries quickly appeared in the air. However, the appearance of these boundaries was too hasty. Many demon masters did not even have time to complete the boundary with their companions before the Light Demon Master's attacks, with the help of the 5 elements mutual generation and cycle formation arrived. In fact, there was another reason why the Dark Demon Army was not prepared, and that was the distance. At this time, although the demon masters of both sides were at the forefront of their own camp, there was still a long distance between them. The Dark Demon Masters knew that unless it was an attack at the level of a sure kill skill, they would not be able to release a demonic skill from such a long distance. Therefore, they subconsciously thought that the Light Demon Masters would not be able to overcome the problem of distance. However, what they didn't know was that the 5 elements mutual generation and circulation formation that Jidong had invented, although it wasn't like the 5 elements boundary that could unleash the power of the 5 elements and 10 elements in one go, it could continuously improve the power of the 10 elements Devil Masters in a short period of time through the 5 elements mutual generation process, causing the strength of the 10 elements Devil Masters to sublimate through the mutual generation process, reaching a strength that they normally couldn't reach. The mana was also incomparably abundant. Moreover, under Ji Yunsheng's command, the thousands of lights were of the 3rd fire attribute. In the air, the mana of the same attribute had already condensed into a huge light pillar. Distance was no longer a problem. In terms of actual combat ability and training, the Light Demon Masters were far inferior to the Dark Demon Army. However, in the past few years, the Light Camp had spent the most time practicing the 5 elements coexistence cycle formation, because they all understood that this would be their real weapon against the Dark Demon Army. Only by relying on the 5 elements coexistence cycle formation could they compete with the Dark Demon Army. That was the joint attack of tens of thousands of demon masters. Dark Tianji had never thought that the other party could actually combine the attacks of tens of thousands of demon masters into one and release it with a single attribute. In his opinion, this was completely impossible. Not to mention him, even the inventor of the 5-element coexistence cycle formation, Jidong, would not have imagined that the formation he had invented would one day bloom with such powerful energy. This was the confidence of the Light Army. Almost all demon masters knew a single attribute, multi-superposition magic skill. However, the number of 1,000 was the limit of a single attribute, multi-superposition magic skill. The Light Demon Masters did not violate this limit. They were indeed condensed by 1,000 third Fire Demon Masters, but each of them was condensed by 10 people with a 5 elements coexistence cycle formation. In this way, the power produced by their attacks was too terrifying. It could be said that it was a top-notch area of effect super killing skill with a top-notch single-target super killing power. On the flank of the Dark Demon Army, there were less than 305 elements boundaries that could effectively produce defense. In the face of this terrifying torrent of third fire, they were almost torn apart in an instant. The distance between the two sides was indeed too far, causing the attack of the Light Demon Masters to be weakened a lot. The red light only flashed, but even so, when the red light swept past, more than 3,000 Dark Demon Masters disappeared from the battlefield in front of them. Chapter 662. Shock. When the Light Demon Masters used the 5-element cycle formation to unleash terrifying combat power and instantly swept away the 3,000 Dark Demon Masters, the entire Dark Demon Army fell into extreme shock. The 3,000 Dark Demon Army was not a number that they could not afford to lose. However, the key was the distance. The two armies were on the Holy Evil Island and were at least 20 miles away from each other. At such a distance, even 9 Crown Supremes were usually at a safe distance from each other. No matter what level the demonic skill was, its power would gradually weaken with distance. Even ultimate killing moves were no exception. However, under such circumstances, the Light Demon Masters managed to kill 3,000 Dark Demon Masters with a combined strength of 10,000 people. It was an absolutely unbelievable scene. Although the Dark Demon Army did not have any dark heavenly stem divine beasts, they were extremely confident in themselves. It was not only because of the strength of Dark Tianji, but also because of their own strength. The total number of Dark Demon Masters was more than 4 times that of the enemy, and the total amount of demonic power was likely more than 10 times that of the enemy. There were also more than 100,000 backup Dark Demon Masters. In the eyes of the Dark Demon Army, even if they did not attack, just the backup Dark Demon Army was enough to wipe out the Light Demon Masters in front of them. However, under such circumstances, the Light Demon Masters in front of them had done what the Dark Demon Army could not. They found it hard to believe. Attack! Attack with all your might. Darkness Tianji's furious voice sounded all of a sudden, causing the Dark Demon Army to react. Even though Darkness Tianji didn't give them any effective orders, the Dark Demon Army was well trained, after all, and they reacted to the situation immediately. The 40,000 Dark Demon Army was divided into groups of 1,000 people. At the front, there were 10 groups of 10,000 people. These 10,000 people were distributed evenly according to the 10 attributes. In other words, among the 1,000 Dark Demon Masters in each group, there were 100 people of each attribute. After the 10,000 Dark Magicians reacted, they immediately opened their 5 elements boundary. 1,000 5 elements boundaries appeared at the same time and immediately merged into a superimposed 5 elements boundary. The terrifying pressure instantly made the defense on their side incomparably tough. Apart from the Air Force, the other 30,000 Dark Demon Masters were also divided into groups of 1,000 people, but they were distributed according to the same attribute. In other words, every group of 1,000 people had the same attribute. In this way, when they launched an attack, they could rely on the overlapping of thousands of people to display the most powerful combat strength. This was a group of more than 20,000 people. In an instant, he could release more than 20 high-level sure-kill magic skills and above. This was definitely a destructive force. Even if the Dark Dragon Emperor brought thousands of giant dragons, they wouldn't stand a chance against the Dark Demon Army head-on. And this was the situation after the Dark Demon Army was weakened by the Radiant Heavenly Stem Saints. If not for the Radiant Heavenly Stem Saints, there would probably be close to 50 groups of such Dark Magicians on the battlefield now. At the same time, the reserve Dark Magicians at the rear of the Dark Demon Army also began to move. Although their mana was not strong, it was not a problem for them to release the 5 elements boundary. More than 100,000 Demon Masters kept releasing 5 elements boundary, forming a weaker but larger 5 elements boundary that actually enveloped the entire Dark Demon Army. This was the invincible lion that Darkness Tianji had nurtured for many years and painstakingly built up. The full power of the Darkness Demon Army was enough to make people tremble. At the same time, the Dark Demon Army in the sky had also begun their attack. Their target was the Radiant Army's air force. Even though the Dark Dragon Emperor had been defeated, they still had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers. Furthermore, it wasn't just the thousands of dark dragons. The Dark Army in the sky was equally terrifying. Not only did these Dark Devil Masters have their own mounts, but their own cultivation base was also higher than 6 crowns. A total of 6,000 people. What kind of powerful force was this? With the previous order from Darkness Tianji, the Dark Army, the invincible lion in Darkness Tianji's heart, finally bared its fangs and launched a tyrannical attack against the Radiant Army. At this moment, the second wave of attack from the Radiant Army appeared. It was also of the fire attribute, exactly the same as the previous attack. Compared to the first round, it was less than 20 seconds apart. If it wasn't for the well-trained Dark Demon Army that immediately opened the 5 elements boundary, the second round of attack would have fallen directly into their hands. So fast, this was the thought that appeared in the hearts of all the Dark Demon Army at the same time. It should be known that after a magic skill was released, it would take a certain amount of time just to fly in the air with magic power over such a long distance. And the previous powerful attack had completely surpassed the sum of the 10,000 dark magicians. How did they do it again in such a short time? Of course, the Dark Demon Army did not know that the light magicians relied on the 5-element cycle formation created by Jidong. The biggest advantage of this 5-element cycle formation was not its instantaneous power, nor was it its ability to combine the magic power of 10 people to burst out a mutual attack. It was the endless cycle of mutual generation. Relying on the mutual generation cycle, although the attack launched by the light magicians was powerful, it consumed very little of their own magic power. Moreover, they could launch another attack through the mutual generation cycle in the first place, and, at the same time, they could greatly restore their magic power. This was the most terrifying part of the 5-element cycle formation. It was also the reason why the supreme experts of the Radiant Continent were shocked when they saw Jidong's formation. In the midst of the loud bang, a scene that shocked the Dark Army appeared. Even the Dark Demon Army, who had an overwhelming advantage in the air, could not help but pause for a moment. The reason was very simple. On the ground, the 5 elements boundary laid by the 10,000 dark magicians was blown up in an instant by this bombardment, even though the terrifying third fire magic power also dissipated. However, such a terrible scene still made the Dark Army, who was preparing to charge, suddenly stagnate. It should be known that although both sides had 10,000 people at the same time, the Light Army was the attacking side. Their magic power had to fly more than 20 miles to reach the Dark Army. In the process of this flight, the loss was quite considerable. Meanwhile, the great 5 elements boundary set up by the Dark Army was right in front of them. Moreover, in terms of overall strength, if it was a one-on-one battle, the Dark Magicians were definitely above the Light Magicians. They were relying on the 5 elements boundary formation, which contained all 10 elements, to defend themselves. In any case, the attack of the Light Magicians should not have any effect. However, under such circumstances, the great 5 elemental barriers still shattered. This could only prove one thing. That was, the magic released by the more than 10,000 light magicians had far exceeded the defensive power of the 10,000 people of the Dark Demon Army. Every attack of the light magicians was the sum of the 10 people's magic power. Through the cycle, not only could they save magic power, but the attack power they exerted was also qualitatively improved. Back then, the 10 2-crown and 3-crown magicians were able to defeat the 6-crown magicians because of this formation. At this moment, the 5-element cycle formation invented by Ji Dong finally blossomed on this magnificent battlefield. The 5 elements boundary was destroyed. If he wanted to recover, he would need time. But at this moment, the light magicians on the opposite side did not seem to need to take a breath at all, and the third attack had already come. Stop, full defense. Dark Tianji had to give such an order. and even the purple robe high priests around him also threw themselves into defense. The attack of the light magicians was too strong. Every time they got a little closer, it meant that the attack of the light magicians would become stronger because of the distance. And at this time, the 5 elements boundary had not yet recovered, and they could only rely on the other 20 groups of single-attribute dark magicians to offset the opponent's attack. More than 20 tyrannical high-level and top-level killing skills came out and collided with the third attack of the light magicians. In the eyes of the dark magicians, the light magicians barely launched the third attack, and their magic power would be weakened a little. What's more, this time, it was an attack launched by more than 20,000 dark magicians. Although they could not attack the opponent's headquarters, at least they could easily defeat the opponent's attack. However, they forgot that although there were more than 20,000 people attacking this time, they were doing their own thing. Although there were thousands of superimposed amplifications, how could it be compared with the amplification of the fusion of 10 attributes of the 5 elements boundary? The result was shocking. The attacks of both sides disappeared at the same time. The joint third fire attack of the light army forcibly defeated the joint magic skills of the enemy, twice their number. The appearance of this scene not only stunned the dark demon army, but also the commanders of the light army were extremely shocked. Although they also knew that the light army could exert powerful strength by relying on the 5-element cycle formation, they did not expect it to be strong to such an extent. With 10,000 people, they forcibly suppressed the opponent's more than 30,000 dark magicians. How powerful was this? What's more, this was still the case when the two sides were so far apart. Ji Yunsheng did not issue the order to press forward. Although it was possible to make their attacks more powerful by closing the distance, there was no doubt that they had to get close to the opponent's powerful air force. If the opponent's air force launched an attack, then the light magicians on the ground were bound to support the air force. Without enough distance, the dark demon army would inevitably launch an attack, which was not what Ji Yunsheng wanted to see. After all, in terms of overall strength, the gap between the two sides was still huge. Now, they were barely maintaining the current balance by relying on the advantage of the 5-element cycle formation. Ji Yunsheng was already very satisfied to be able to kill more than 3,000 dark magicians in one fell swoop. The fourth wave of attack of the light army also burst forth. At this time, the 5 elements boundary of the dark army had just recovered. The situation on the ground directly affected the situation in the sky. Just as Ji Yunsheng was worried that the powerful air force of the dark demon army would launch an attack on them, the air force of the dark demon army was also worried that the light magicians on the ground would turn their attacks to them. Although they were in the air and were further away, this distance would no longer be an obstacle if they launched a charge and attacked the opponent's air force. Hence, the dark dragons and dark demon army that were just about to launch an attack had no choice but to stop and watch the light dragon emperor return proudly. For a moment, the battlefield was in a delicate balance. Neither side dared to act rashly, but the terrifying mana bombardment was still going on. No, to be precise, it should be the light magicians who were obviously weaker than the opponent were completely suppressing the dark demon army, making it difficult for them to take a step forward. Neither side took the initiative to destroy the scene in front of them, and they all had their own ideas. Ji Yunsheng wanted to see if his side could gradually increase the apparent advantage, while the dark demon army was waiting for the mana of the light magicians to be exhausted. After all, their overall strength surpassed that of the light magicians. Moreover, the light magicians had 2 rounds, while the dark demon army only needed 1 round to deal with them. They clearly had the advantage in numbers in terms of energy consumption. Unfortunately, they did not know that the light demon army had the support of the 5-element cycle formation. Whoever took the initiative to attack first was likely to be at a disadvantage. Under such circumstances, both sides were very restrained, with millions of troops holding the line and only relying on the dark demon army to attack each other. The light demon army did not press on either. The light dragon emperor was extremely satisfied at this moment. Although the dark dragon emperor would be able to recover from a broken arm in no time, the broken dragon claw would not grow back. Although the dragon race was strong, they did not have the ability to regenerate. The originally balanced strength of both sides immediately tilted to one side. How could he not be happy? Moreover, the Dark Dragon Emperor still had to be wary of his god-killing strike. If they really fought, the advantage would be even more obvious. Just as the two armies were in a stalemate, the final weapon, Li Yonghao, was also on the way back with the Dark Heavenly Stem Saints. Li Yonghao deliberately delayed the time of his return. At this moment, they were still an hour away from the front line. In his opinion, once the Holy War began, the battle between both sides would become white-hot. If they arrived later, not only would they be able to preserve their strength, but they would also be able to see the situation of the battlefield clearly and decide what to do next. No matter what, they would be in an invincible position. At this moment, a calm and distant voice suddenly sounded in the ears of the Dark Heavenly Stem Saints. You can stop now. There is no need for you to participate in the holy war ahead for now. As the voice appeared, two figures gradually appeared in front of the path that the Dark Heavenly Stem Saints had to pass through. Chapter 663. Li Yonghao was leading the Dark Stem Saints to the center of the Holy Evil Island. He didn't expect that he would be stopped by two people while leading all the Dark Stem Saints. Besides, he couldn't help but be shocked when he got a clear look at the two of them. The two people who appeared not far away from Li Yonghao and the Dark Stem Saints were both dressed in white. At least on the surface, they didn't seem to be carrying any magical weapons. They were a man and a woman, and the most eye-catching one was the woman. Exquisite to the point of perfection, porcelain-like skin, and an incomparably alluring golden ratio figure. She was like a piece of white, flawless jade, without a single flaw to be found. However, her gentle gaze seemed to only be directed at the man beside her. From the beginning to the end, she didn't even look at the Dark Stem Saints at all. Although the beautiful woman was the most attractive one, the Dark Stem Saints fixed their eyes on the man when they saw the two people in front of them. The reason was simple. This man had shocked them countless times. Furthermore, he had single-handedly led the Radiant Heavenly Gang Holy Disciples to turn the entire Five Elements continent upside down. He was the tyrant Jidong, even the ultimate weapon of the Dark Heavenly Gang Holy King. Li Yonghao was ashamed of his inferiority. Li Yonghao did not see Jidong and Chun Sichuan when he was negotiating with Radiant Sky, Gone Holy Apostles. Although Tianji had gained his trust by swearing an oath, Li Yonghao found some flaws in it when he thought about it carefully. As the Dark Stem Holy King, how could he not understand the subtlety of the word game? But at this moment, when he saw Jidong appear in front of him, the last sliver of hope in his heart vanished. Indeed, Jidong was still alive and well. Besides, all the saints were still alive too. Frankly speaking, from a Yonghao's point of view, the shock he felt at this moment had reached an extreme level. He found it hard to believe that Jidong and his Radiant Heavenly Stem Saints were able to remain unscathed after killing such a powerful Dark Death Guard. How inconceivable! If it were the Dark Stem Saints, Li Yonghao believed that even if they went all out, it would be hard to say if they could even achieve 1/5 of what Jidong and the rest had done. Of course, he also knew some of the weaknesses of the Darkness Death Guards, but knowing them did not mean that he could grasp them. Could it be? Had the strength of the Radiant Heavenly Stem Saints really reached such a level? It must be known that there were only 3 people who had broken through to 9 crowns among the Dark Stem Saints. Although the others had also broken through to 8 crowns, they were clearly not on the same level as the Radiant Saints. The last time he saw Tianji and the others, all the Radiant Saints had broken through to 9 crowns. Brother Jidong, long time no see. Li Yonghao tried his best to calm himself down and said with a smile, as if he had really met an old friend. Jidong smiled faintly. Yes, it's been a long time. However, should I call you Holy King of Darkness? Or should I call you President Li? Li Yonghao's expression changed slightly, and he said, Brother Jidong, please call me by my name. I believe you already know about the negotiation I had with your holy disciples not long ago. We have already confirmed the direction of our cooperation. May I know why Brother Jidong is blocking our way now? After a brief moment of absent-mindedness, he had completely calmed down. In his opinion, although Jidong and Qin Sixuan were very strong, they had all the holy disciples. However, they were both holy disciples. Even if Jidong's cultivation level was higher than theirs, he could at most escape unscathed. Now, he only wanted to know the specific purpose of Jidong's visit. Jidong smiled slightly. Of course, he did not know what Li Yonghao and Tianji had discussed, but he could guess the gist of it. Not long after Tianji and the others left, Jidong gradually woke up from his deep sleep. This process of waking up took a total of 10 days. To wake up Jidong, open up his sealed soul and body, and completely adapt to the changes in his body. Even Dark Tianji would not be able to do it. The only person in the world who could do this was probably Qin Sixuan. This was because she still had a trace of God's power. With the guidance of her divine sense, Qin Sixuan slowly released Jidong's sleeping soul and completely integrated it with his body. After 10 days of rest and adaptation, and after calculating the exact time for the Red Lotus heavenly fire to extinguish, Qin Sixuan and Jidong then set off. The reason why Qin Sixuan did not let Jidong wake up from his deep sleep was not only because she wanted to be in close contact with Jidong, but also for Jidong's own good. The damage to Jidong's body was too severe. Although he had recovered through self-repair and external treatment, it would take a long time for him to stabilize, especially to integrate with his own mana. If Jidong were to wake up earlier, based on Qin Sixuan's understanding of him, Jidong would not continue to rest and would lead the holy followers to attack the army of darkness. That would definitely leave a hidden danger in his body, and he would not be able to fully absorb the mana contained in the 9 natal red lotus seeds. Since Qin Sixuan could control the time when Jidong would wake up, she naturally would not see this happen. Hence, she did not guide Jidong's soul all this while. After Jidong woke up from his deep sleep, he learned that Tianji and the others had already left, so it was naturally more troublesome to contact them. Logically speaking, he should not know Li Yonghao's whereabouts. However, although he could not contact Tianji, he could contact another person who was more in control of the situation than Tianji and the others. That was his senior brother, the Thunder Emperor Fury. Through the 10,000-mile voice transmission stone, Jidong got in touch with Fury and informed his senior brother that he was still alive. At the same time, he also received news from Fury that the Red Lotus heavenly fire was about to be extinguished and that the Dark Stem Saints were about to return from the Dark Fortress. Jidong brought Qin Sixuan and teleported to the vicinity of the Dark Fortress. Then, in a short 2 days before the Red Lotus heavenly fire was extinguished, he did a lot of things, but he didn't have time to inform anyone. After doing what he had to do, he returned to the Holy Evil Island and waited for the return of the Dark Heavenly Stem Saints on the path that he had to pass. According to Jidong's original calculations, the Dark Stem Saints should have returned earlier, especially after he received news from Fury that the Red Lotus heavenly fire had disappeared. However, the Dark Heavenly Stem Saints were late. From this point, he could vaguely guess some of Li Yonghao's thoughts. Therefore, even if he did not know what Li Yonghao and Tianji had discussed, he could roughly make some guesses. After Fury was ordered to lead the army by the Dark Stem Saints, he kept in touch with Jidong, so that Jidong could be informed of the situation at the front line at all times. Originally, he was going to give up the goal of intercepting the Dark Stem Saints and rush to the main battlefield as soon as possible. However, according to the news from Fury, the Light Dragon Emperor had won, and the Light Army had entered a stalemate with the help of the 5-element cycle formation. In this way, he was not anxious at all. It would not take long to rush to the front line from here at full speed. Wasn't it more appropriate to deal with the threat of the Dark Stem Saints now? Looking at Li Yonghao, Jidong said with a smile, "I was just thinking, since we are cooperating, and the ultimate goal is to make the Holy Evil Island a barrier that separates the 2 continents again, and your Dark Army has such a great advantage now, there is no need for you to go to the front line, right? Please stay here and wait for the results in front of you to appear. When my Radiant Army defeats the Darkness Army and Dark Heavenly Secrets, I will naturally invite everyone to rebuild the barrier with us. What do you think?" Li Yonghao's countenance changed slightly. Brother Jidong, how can I trust you? If your light army wins, will you invade our darkness continent? Jidong said calmly. Do you think everyone thinks the same as you? A straightforward person doesn't beat around the bush, so I won't beat around the bush. I know exactly what you're thinking. If Darkness Heavenly Secrets wins, then you'll continue to lead the Darkness Heavenly STEM Saints as your lackeys. If Dark Tianji and we both suffer heavy losses, that is what you want to see the most. You will take over his position and lead the Dark Army to invade our light world. Actually, the situation you don't want to see the most is the destruction of Dark Tianji. You are worried that if that happens, we will invade the Darkness Continent. I'm right? Although Li Yonghao knew that Jidong might have guessed his intentions, he didn't expect him to say it out so directly. For a moment, his countenance changed, and he said coldly, Don't you think so? Even if your goal isn't to unify the 5 elements continent, is your ultimate goal different from mine? If you destroy Dark Tianji, you won't invade our Darkness Continent? I won't, Jidong said decisively, causing the Dark Stem Holy Disciples to be stunned. Jidong said calmly, Our goals and objectives are completely different. I have no interest in conquering the world. What I want to do is to let peace reappear on both continents. Only then will the bloodshed of the commoners stop. War is the cruelest thing in the world. Have you ever thought about how many commoners will suffer when the ruler starts a war for his own interests? How many soldiers will die on the battlefield? Li Yonghao snorted disdainfully. Are there fewer people who died in your hands? In terms of the number of people killed, you're probably thousands of times more than me, but you're saying this to me with a strong sense of righteousness. Jidong, don't make me look down on you. Jidong smiled indifferently. It doesn't matter whether you look down on me or not. I'm not hypocritically saying anything to you here. That's right, I've killed a lot of people. You can also count all the dark soldiers who died under the power of the world creation 6 directions under my name. However, I'm doing this so that more people can survive. If I let your dark army invade my Radiance continent, how many people will die? Those who are not of our race must have a different heart. This kind of thinking isn't something that only the Dark Tianji have. Li Yonghao's eyes flashed with cold light. If we don't get along, I don't want to argue with you. I don't want to talk to you now, but if you block our way again, I don't care if the Light Saints lose a holy king. Do you think that just the 2 of you can block the way of all the Dark Tianji Saints? Jidong shook his head and said, Of course not just the 2 of us. Li Yonghao was stunned, and his heart suddenly sank. He thought to himself, could it be that all the Light Tianji Saints are nearby? If that's the case, they're really in danger. However, Jidong's next words made him fall into a state of shock. It's just me. Jidong smiled and patted Qin Sixuan on the shoulder. Qin Sixuan's figure flashed and turned into a green light, retreating far away. At this moment in the whole world, no one knew better than her what kind of strength Jidong had. This time, without waiting for Li Yonghao to speak, the Darkamu Saint Scorpion beside him couldn't help but rebuke. Jidong, don't be too arrogant. Do you think you can block our way by yourself? Jidong smiled. How will you know if you don't try? He wasn't in a hurry. He had already made arrangements for the front line. Not to mention the fact that the light magicians were in a deadlock with the Dark Tianji army. Even if they couldn't, he still had a backup plan. The only thing worth worrying about was Dark Tianji's attack. In this holy war, his strength as a peak martial sage was unparalleled. However, Jidong also firmly believed that the light magicians still had the ability to withstand Dark Tianji for the time being. At least, it was enough for them to hold on until he dealt with the Dark Tianji Saints. Li Yonghao really didn't want to fight with Jidong. He naturally knew that Jidong's strength was extraordinary, and he hoped that Jidong would appear on the main battlefield and lead the Light Tianji Saints to besiege Dark Tianji. That was what he wanted to see. After all, it wasn't just the Light Tianji Saints who were afraid of Dark Tianji. Even he, the Dark Tianji Saint ruler, was deeply afraid of Dark Tianji. If he didn't kill Dark Tianji, he wouldn't dare to take any real action. However, he didn't expect Jidong to insist on blocking their way. At this moment, as the Dark Tianji Saint ruler, he had no other choice. No matter what, he had to defeat Jidong first. At the thought of this, the dark Tianji, saint ruler who had the support of the ultimate weapon, shouted with a gloomy expression, "Get into formation. Let's experience the strength of a light saint ruler." Chapter 664. The dark stem saints were all riding on their own mounts, just like the bright stem saints. Most of them chose dragons as their mounts. As the dark stem saint king, Li Yonghao was riding on an adult black dragon that was over 30 meters long. It had to be known that all black dragons of the Dark Five Elements continent were said to have royal bloodlines. Back then, Li Yonghao had put in a lot of effort to obtain this black dragon. A faint light flickered, and Ji Dong's face revealed a trace of cold light. He didn't have the slightest intention of making the first move. Instead, he watched as the dark stem saints formed a semicircle formation and surrounded him. The ultimate mana of the 10 dark stem saints rose almost at the same time, and the yin-yang crown above their heads displayed their powerful strength. Just like how the heavenly stem saints' ultimate magic power had a strong light attribute compared to ordinary mages, the heavenly stem saints' ultimate magic power also had a strong dark attribute. Especially Li Yonghao, who was in the middle. As the dark stem saint, his element was metal, but his sharp aura was completely restrained. He slowly raised the divine weapon metal element sword in his hand and pointed it at Ji Dong. Even though there wasn't the slightest bit of sharpness leaking out, the formless pressure gave off a feeling that everything was under control. The radiant heavenly stem holy disciples were constantly growing, and it was the same for the dark heavenly stem holy disciples. Compared to the battle between saints and evil, they were no longer on the same level. Seeing that Ji Dong was still floating there in his white robes, without any intention of defending or attacking, the rage in Li Yonghao's heart was ignited. This was disdain, the most direct form of disdain. Faced with the formation of 10 saints, he did not even have the slightest reaction. Was he really so confident that he could escape unscathed? All of a sudden, Li Yonghao felt a little stifled, and he thought of a possibility that he was most unwilling to see. With a thought, he shouted, "Ji Dong, I'll fight you one-on-one." As he spoke, the tip of his foot tapped on the black dragon's head, and his body flew out, stopping 50 meters away from Ji Dong in the air. Ji Dong stared at Li Yonghao in surprise. He, too, could not understand why Li Yonghao had chosen to fight him one-on-one despite having the advantage in numbers and basic attributes. Actually, Li Yonghao had no other choice. He knew very well that if he led the Dark Stem Saints to join forces and attack Ji Dong, it would be fine if he managed to capture Ji Dong. However, if he managed to escape, his prestige among the Dark Stem Saints would definitely take a huge hit. It must be known that any heavenly stem saint was a dragon among men, and it was not easy to command such a group of people. On the other hand, he had a deeper thought. In a one-on-one battle, even if he lost, it would not be embarrassing. After all, it was a one-on-one battle. If he could defeat Ji Dong in a one-on-one battle, Ji Dong would definitely be defeated and leave. In that case, his original plan would not be ruined. Li Yonghao had absolute confidence in his own strength. He knew that he could also kill a Darkness Death Guard in a one-on-one battle. He did not have much time to think, but he instantly determined that a one-on-one battle with Ji Dong was his best choice. As expected, when Li Yonghao came out alone, not only was Ji Dong surprised, but the dark heavenly stem holy disciples also unconsciously revealed looks of admiration in their eyes. No one stepped forward. This was a battle between two saint kings. Ji Dong nodded slowly. "All right, your courage alone is worth me going all out." As he spoke, a layer of golden red light appeared on his body. The sacred fire Saint King armor, which had evolved into a god weapon, silently appeared and enveloped Ji Dong's body. Compared to before, the sacred fire Saint King armor had become blood red, but the light it emitted was dazzling gold. It was also filled with an intense aura of light. Even though the style didn't change much, the aura of the armor itself was completely different. Seeing Ji Dong's sacred fire Saint King armor, Li Yonghao's heart immediately tightened. Although he had not truly fought with Ji Dong before, he had asked the purple-robed priest who had fought with Ji Dong about Ji Dong's abilities. He also knew that Ji-dong's god weapon should be his sword. But at this moment, how could Ji-dong's armor be explained? With Li Yonghao's abilities, he could naturally see that Ji-dong's was clearly a god weapon. Moreover, it was a god weapon filled with the aura of light. Please, Ji-dong made an inviting gesture towards Li Yonghao. The reason why he had put on the Sacred Fire Saint King armor was out of respect for Li Yonghao. No matter what Li Yonghao's motives were, under such circumstances, he had dared to come out and fight a battle between Saint Kings. This was already enough to gain his respect. Moreover, just like how Li Yonghao was unwilling to kill him, Ji-dong was similarly unwilling to kill Li Yonghao. From his understanding, Li Yonghao was definitely worthy of being called a ruthless person. If the Light faction obtained the final victory, even if the Darkness continent was once again isolated, there would definitely be great chaos if there was no powerful person to control it. What Ji-dong had said to Li Yonghao earlier was definitely not false. What he wanted to do the most was to restore peace to both continents, so that as few civilians would die as possible. If not for Li Yonghao's leadership, the Darkness continent would definitely become a pile of loose sand. It was to be expected that there would be endless wars. Given the abilities of Shan Yu and Shan Lei, it was not enough to rule the Darkness continent. Only Li Yonghao could intimidate the Darkness army. Hence, the purpose of Ji-dong's trip this time was indeed to prevent the Darkness heavenly followers from entering the battlefield and affecting the situation, not to kill these people. Li Yonghao made his move. Due to the fact that Ji-dong had killed the Dark Death Guards and the Dark Heavenly Stem Divine Beast, Li Yonghao had a high opinion of Ji-dong. He also knew how important it was to seize the initiative in a battle of this level. With a flash, the distance of 50 meters had already disappeared. In the next moment, Li Yonghao had already appeared in front of Ji-dong. The divine-level long sword in his hand trembled slightly in the air. With an ear-piercing whistle, 9 swords stabbed out at almost the same time. 9 golden sword flowers appeared in the air, respectively pointing at 9 spots on Hyohan's body. The sharpness that had always been contained within did not spread at this moment. Instead, it was completely contained within the 9 sword flowers. Just this sword alone was enough for Ji-dong to have a whole new level of respect for Li Yonghao. There is no doubt that Li Yonghao had also put in a lot of effort in terms of close combat ability. This was especially so for this sword technique. Even Ji-dong felt ashamed of his inferiority. The 9 sword flowers sealed off all possible routes of evasion for Ji-dong. Although there seemed to be no aura being emitted, Ji-dong had no doubt that each sword flower contained a huge amount of extreme, gung-metal demonic power and Li Yonghao's true sharpness. What was even more terrifying was that the core stamen of each sword flower was milky white. In other words, in the center of these 9 sword flowers, they all had the existence of the profound meaning of chaotic metal. This sword that seemed to be done casually, but Li Yonghao had already used his full strength. Ji-dong could be sure that if it were any ordinary 9-crown Devil Master, it would be extremely difficult to block this sword. The profound meaning of chaotic metal lay in creation. Li Yonghao was using the chaotic metal as the source of his 9 sword flowers. Once it erupted, the continuous extreme, gung-metal demonic power would be created. The instantaneous lethality could even double Li Yonghao's own demonic power. What a strong sword technique. Ji-dong secretly praised in his heart, but he was not moved because of this. His figure floated back, and at the same time, his left hand flicked lightly, and a god-destroying wall had already been placed between the two. That's right, Ji-dong really could not dodge Li Yonghao's sword. He had to face it head-on, but using the god-destroying wall itself was also a way to face it head-on. There was a soft poof, and in an instant, what Ji-dong saw was a golden light net instantly spread out. It was formed by the 9 sword flowers. This time, the surprise in his eyes could not help but become more intense. Li Yonghao's 9 swords actually had such a change. Moreover, although the sharp qi disappeared in a flash, in Ji-dong's perception, the sharp qi contained in these 9 swords could actually condense into one in an instant. Just the concept of the attack alone was already extremely close to the level of a top-notch killing technique. It should be known that this was in close combat, and there was no possibility of both sides accumulating power. This could only prove one thing. Li Yonghao had directly used his own sword technique to directly complete a multi-attribute combination technique in the air. To be able to complete such a technique with his own strength, one could imagine the extent of his immersion in swordsmanship. Seeing this sword, all the dark heavenly stem saints could not help but reveal sincere admiration in their eyes, especially the dark Emu Saint Scorpion. She was the closest person to Li Yonghao. Only she knew how much her brother had sacrificed. Li Yonghao was calm in front of others, but he was unimaginably crazy in private, and this madness was all used in cultivation. In terms of cultivation, he almost did not sleep or rest. In terms of aptitude, Li Yonghao was actually not the best among the dark heavenly stem saints, but he was several times more hard-working than the others. In addition to the extremely harsh training, he also continuously used self-torture to cultivate. It could be said that Li Yonghao's current achievements were completely obtained through his own hard work. Back then, he had lost to Fury several times on the Holy Evil Island, and that was completely because of Dark Fate's orders. Otherwise, even if he had faced Fury for the first time, when his mana was far inferior to Fury's, Fury might not have been able to defeat him. Li Yonghao's diligence and self-torture cultivation was also one of the biggest fears that Darkness Tianji had towards him. Every member of the Dark Heavenly Stem Saints and the Bright Heavenly Stem Saints had the possibility of cultivating to the saint level. However, Darkness Tianji understood that if there was anyone in the dark world who could touch the edge of the divine realm in the future, then Li Yonghao would be the other possibility. If Darkness Tianji wanted to reach the divine realm, he had to devour holy beasts, but Li Yonghao had completely relied on his own efforts. Darkness Tianji had even said in private that if Li Yonghao was given enough time and space, then one day he would definitely become the most powerful dark heavenly stem saint in history. Of course, Ji Dong did not know all this, but he was deeply shocked by Li Yonghao's standing. In that instant, Li Yonghao's attack power had even surpassed that of Lin Qing, whom he had faced before. Li Yonghao's mana was at level 94, but he had burst out with the strength of a saint-level attack. He was indeed worthy of being called the Dark Heavenly Stem Saint. The God-destroying wall was instantly shattered by the light of Li Yonghao's Gung Metal Divine Sword, but his attack did not affect Ji Dong's body in the end. Ji Dong had already retreated more than 10 meters away. The God-destroying wall's function was to create a momentary opportunity, be it in terms of rotation or defense. Li Yonghao's attack instantly erupted. He pointed his sword forward, and his entire body accelerated with all his might. The tip of his sword was pointed at the center of Ji Dong's eyebrows. His entire body became one with the sword, and like a golden lightning, he went straight for Ji Dong. In a short distance of 10 meters, he actually dashed again. At this time, Ji Dong also moved. However, compared to Li Yonghao's indomitable advance, his movements seemed a little slow in the eyes of the Dark Heavenly Stem Saints. Ji Dong's left hand drew a circle to the left of his chest, drawing a half arc in the air, while his right hand drew a circle upward. His body did not move at all, and there was not a single bit of mana bursting out from his body. However, it was such a simple action that changed Li Yonghao's attack. Li Yonghao's Gung Metal Divine sword suddenly trembled in the air, and the tip of the sword that was originally aimed at Hyoheim's eyebrows suddenly deviated and slashed across the side of Ji Dong's face. Only Li Yonghao himself could feel that when his essence, qi, and spirit were clearly concentrated on Ji Dong's body, two powerful forces appeared in the air without warning. One was guiding, and the other was pushing, changing the direction of his sword. Li Yonghao completely did not understand how Ji Dong did it, but at this moment, he did not have much time to think. His body deviated, which meant that he had exposed a flaw, and he did not dare to be the slightest bit careless. The moment he realized that the tip of the sword had deviated, he had already made a horizontal movement in the air and forcefully rolled his body to the side. His movement was so fast that it seemed as if he had already planned it. It was smooth, and it was done in one go. At the same time, The Gung metal divine sword in his hand also transformed into thousands of golden lights as his wrist trembled. Every golden light was like a ray of light that interweaved in the air and attacked Hyoheim. Good swordsmanship. Ji Dong gasped in admiration. It should be known that from the beginning of Li Yonghao's attack, every attack of his was at the level of a sure kill technique, and he could attack, defend, and dodge at the same time. His speed was so fast, and his combat ability was so strong that it was worthy of his title as the ultimate weapon. Chapter 665. It could be said that Li Yonghao was the strongest nine-crowned supreme being that Ji Dong had ever encountered. Even though Ji Dong had been testing Li Yonghao's strength on purpose and had not fought back directly, the fact that he had been forced to concentrate by Li Yonghao at his current level of cultivation showed that this ultimate weapon's strength was not to be underestimated. Ji Dong's current strength was Ji Dong was no longer as calm as he was before amidst the countless interweaving golden rays in the air. His body started to move like a nimble fish. Under the shocked gazes of the dark heavenly stem saints, Ji Dong's body shuttled through Li Yonghao's sword net. He was always able to find some gaps in Li Yonghao's sword net and pass through them. Ji Dong's body seemed to have no bones at all, and the joints of the human body could not produce any restrictions at all. Li Yonghao felt that Ji Dong's bones seemed to be able to reassemble. His attacks were all targeted at people, but the dodging ability that Ji Dong was displaying could only be described as inhuman. If his attacks were like a large net, then Ji Dong could also pass through the holes in the net. Too strong. This was the evaluation that all the dark heavenly stem saints had of Ji Dong. If Ji Dong had seemed to be in an absolutely passive position at the beginning, then the dodging ability that Ji Dong had displayed at this moment shocked them to the extreme. The battle between supreme being experts was a close-range battle, and it was widely acknowledged that close-range battles were also known as collisions. This was because at such a close distance, the speed that both parties could reach was so fast, and coupled with the fact that they had locked onto each other, there was almost no other choice but to meet force with force. This was just like the battle between the two Dragon Emperors, which was also a head-on battle. However, at this moment, Ji Dong had relied on his unparalleled dodging ability to completely avoid a close-range collision. This first proved that Li Yonghao had not been able to lock onto Ji Dong from the beginning to the end. The cultivation of their souls were not on the same level at all. Secondly, it was the level of the body. It was obvious that Ji Dong's body was so inhuman that it was probably above Li Yonghao's. They were not surprised by this because Fury had told them about Ji Dong's saint-level physique in order to gain the trust of the dark heavenly secrets. Li Yonghao was the one who was the most shocked. He was the one who had experienced Ji Dong's strength firsthand. You should know, from the start, he attacked with all his might. On the surface, it seemed like Ji Dong was completely suppressed by him. However, only he knew that wasn't the case. To be precise, he was being led by the nose by Ji Dong. The feeling that Ji Dong gave Li Yonghao was a little illusory. As he attacked with all his might, he felt that Ji Dong didn't exist. He couldn't lock onto his aura at all. This was because Li Yonghao couldn't even sense the location of his aura. All his attacks landed on empty air. He couldn't even touch the corner of Ji Dong's clothes. If it wasn't for Ji Dong's shout of good swordsmanship, Li Yonghao would have felt like he was fighting with a ghost. The two figures quietly passed each other. Li Yonghao's body swept across the air, the Gung Jin divine sword in front of him. He and Ji Dong's position changed, but they were still 50 meters apart. Ji Dong floated quietly in the air. His calmness made Li Yonghao's heart gradually sink. He took a deep breath. The bones in Li Yonghao's body cracked. His eyes gradually brightened. His eyes looked like they were carved from gold. The Gung Jin divine sword in his hand also emitted an incomparably brilliant light. The sharp aura that had been accumulating previously exploded in the air. The extreme sharpness caused the air to ripple. Faintly, one could even see some faint blacklight marks. That was the effect of the Gung Jin divine sword cutting through the air. Li Yonghao had no choice but to do this. Without a doubt, the sharp aura, once it hit the opponent and was released, it could easily cause serious damage to the opponent. This was similar to Ji Dong's deity strike. It was just that it wasn't on the same level as the deity strike. However, he couldn't grasp Ji-dong's position. No matter how strong his attack was, what use was it if he couldn't touch the opponent? Only by using this seamless aura to grasp the opponent's position could he have a chance to kill him in one blow. Under the immense pressure brought by Ji-dong, the ultimate weapon, Li Yonghao's potential had been completely stimulated. He had entered an unprecedented realm. The full release of the sharp aura finally allowed Li Yonghao to grasp Ji-dong's position. However, he almost lost his mind. Although he had grasped Ji-dong's position, the illusory feeling was the same as before. In other words, bathed in the pure energy waves, he still couldn't completely lock onto Ji-dong. This wasn't the first time Li Yonghao had encountered such a situation. He had experienced it with another person. This person was Tianji, who had swallowed the 4 great sacred beasts and advanced to the pinnacle of the martial saint level. Could it be that his soul cultivation had reached the pinnacle of the martial saint level like Tianji? No, that was impossible. Li Yonghao didn't believe that Ji-dong, who was also a heavenly stem holy ruler like him, could reach such a level in terms of soul cultivation. Even Guangming Tianji's soul cultivation was definitely not at the pinnacle of the martial saint level. Li Yonghao didn't rush to attack due to the uncertainty in his heart. His actual combat experience wasn't inferior to Ji-dong's, and he knew very well the consequences of being uneasy. However, at this moment, Ji-dong moved. He didn't make any fancy movements. He just flew straight out, and in a flash, he disappeared from the 50-meter distance between them. He slapped his palm directly at Li Yonghao's head. The heavenly stem holy disciples couldn't help but look furious. Ji-dong's attack was simply humiliating. They also knew how to attack, and they would only use such a method when facing opponents who were far weaker than them. However, Li Yonghao, who was in the situation, had a completely different feeling. When Ji-dong raised his hand, he also thought that Ji-dong was very arrogant, because such an attack would expose his chest and abdomen, which could be said to be fatal. However, in the next moment, Li Yonghao realized that Ji-dong didn't leave any openings for him. His entire body was as one, and although it looked like he was slapping Lin Li with his palm, it felt more like a huge mountain was pressing down on him. The openings that looked like openings on the surface were no longer openings. Li Yonghao took a deep breath. At this moment, he was in peak condition. Faced with such a situation, he didn't panic at all. Instead, he held the Gung Metal Divine sword with both hands and raised it from the bottom to the top, making a heaven-burning fire technique. Moreover, his movements seemed very slow, but everywhere the Gung Metal Divine sword passed, the air was completely torn apart, leaving only a trace. To tear the space apart, how terrifying the magical wave must be to do that. Li Yonghao had no other choice. Through the previous few encounters, he had fully felt the gap between him and Ji-dong. Only by fighting head-on could he truly discover how big the gap was. Even if he lost, he hoped that he could lose clearly. Ji-dong's palm was covered by the Divine Fire Holy King armor, and the closer his palm was to the Gung Metal Divine sword, the more intense the mountain-like pressure became. Seeing that Ji-dong's palm was about to collide with the Gung Metal Divine sword, the Dark Stem Saints couldn't help but feel nervous. The crucial moment had arrived. No matter how strong Ji-dong was, he was still only relying on his palm. Would he once again dodge the Gung Metal Divine sword and attack Li Yonghao's body? If that was the case, Li Yonghao would probably be seriously injured. From the previous battle, they could see that Li Yonghao couldn't do anything to Ji-dong in this aspect. However, the situation that the Dark Stem Saints were worried about didn't happen. The collision between Ji-dong and Li Yonghao finally happened. Ji-dong didn't rely on his own ability to dodge Li Yonghao's Gung Metal Divine sword, but when the sword was about to touch his palm twisted strangely, avoiding the sharpness, and his palm imprinted on the side of the sword's tip. Li Yonghao was overjoyed. No matter what, he finally had a chance to fight head-on with Ji-dong. He unreservedly poured out all his magical power, and the Gung Metal Divine sword let out a violent buzz. The collision only lasted for a moment. The moment Ji-dong's right palm came into contact with the gung metal divine sword, it suddenly turned into a demonic black and gold color. That strange light made people tremble from the bottom of their hearts. In the next moment, the two sides had already made contact. Li Yonghao's originally somewhat excited expression instantly disappeared, and he became even more pale, because he clearly felt that the magical power he poured out had disappeared without a trace. To be precise, he felt that his own magical power had melted. That's right, it had melted by Ji-dong's magical power. Ji-dong just casually swung his hand, and Li Yonghao's body had already flown out. Immediately after, a violent buzz suddenly sounded, and the heaven and earth were instantly dyed with a touch of gold. Li Yonghao's palm shook, and the gung metal divine sword in his hand had already flown out. The magical weapon that was originally filled with a huge amount of gung metal divine power had actually turned black and white at this moment. In the next moment, Ji-dong's body had already appeared in front of the gung metal divine sword. With a flick of his right hand, his middle finger just happened to flick on the gung metal divine sword spine. Rumble, a thunderous roar, sounded in the sky, and the terrifying magical wave even made it impossible for Li Yonghao to get close. However, his eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. This was because at this moment, his gung metal divine sword, had already been broken in two by that roar, and the sharp qi in the air had instantly been replaced by a wave of scorching heat. No, this is impossible. Even the usually calm Li Yonghao at this moment lost his composure. Yes, in his opinion, everything that Ji-dong had done was simply impossible. He had actually destroyed his own gung metal divine weapon. That was a magical weapon. Even the power of Dark Tianji at the peak of the saint level could not possibly destroy a magical weapon. How'd he do it? Of course, Dark Tianji could not destroy a magical weapon, but Ji-dong was not Dark Tianji. The moment he woke up from his deep sleep, he felt that he had finally grasped the profound meaning of the god-slaying strike. The flick of his finger just now was the perfect display of this profound meaning. The words god-slaying was not an exaggeration. So what if it was a magical weapon? First, the god-slaying strike was filled with magical power, forcing out the gung metal demonic power, and then directly struck by the god-slaying thunder on the weakest part of the sword, which had lost the injection of magical power. Just like that, this divine artifact was destroyed so easily. Li Yonghao could no longer care about the pain in his heart. His face was pale, and he did not suffer any injuries, but the gung metal divine sword that was connected to his bloodline had been broken just like that, and his entire aura had been shattered. Ji-dong had broken the gung metal divine sword with one finger and shocked all the Dark Tianji saints. Was this something that a human could do? In their eyes, Ji-dong's strength had already risen to an unprecedented height. Ji-dong shook his head at Li Yonghao and said indifferently, "You are not a match for me alone. It is better for all of you to come together." Li Yonghao said with some difficulty, "You have already broken through to the sage rank?" Ji-dong nodded silently. His face did not show any signs of complacency, because he knew very well how he had become a sage. The evolution of the Fire Divine Sword had helped Ji-dong break through to the 9 crowns. Under normal circumstances, the huge amount of magical power produced after the evolution of the Fire Divine Sword would be enough to bring Ji-dong to level 95 or even higher. However, when absorbing the magical power of the Fire Divine Sword, in order to deal with the Dark Death Guards, Ji-dong completely opened up his body and did not slow down at all, allowing the huge amount of magical power to directly impact every corner of his body. Doing so caused him to suffer immense pain and even narrowly escape death. However, it also allowed the mana that erupted from the fire god sword to not be wasted in the slightest. Furthermore, it was connected to his flesh and blood and fused together. However, no matter what, the power of the Fire Divine Sword alone was not enough to push him to the sage rank. The thing that truly helped Ji-dong break through the most critical bottleneck was the 9 natal red lotus seeds that the flaming bar had left for him. These 9 natal red lotus seeds had protected Ji Dong at the critical moment, saved his life, and assimilated into his body. Back then, the flaming bar had left these 9 lotus seeds for Ji Dong, so that Ji Dong could directly ascend to the sage rank after breaking through to the 9 crowns. As for the extent to which these 9 lotus seeds could help Ji Dong reach, even the flaming bar himself was not too sure. Ji Dong had broken through, but he was not excited at all because the 9 natal red lotus seeds had also disappeared along with his breakthrough. Chapter 666. The 9 natal red lotus seeds that Flaming Bar had given to Ji Dong were different from the one that she had given to the vermilion bird. The reason was simple. When she had given the vermilion bird that lotus seed, although Flaming Bar had already reached the god tier, she had still been the lowest tier of gods. After spending a long time with Ji Dong, she had been influenced by her feelings and other aspects. That was how she had gradually broken through and finally reached the level of second-tier god. In the core world, even the god of killing, Shupness, who was one of the strongest second-tier gods, had almost been defeated by Flaming Bar. If he had not used Ji Dong to influence Flaming Bar, it would have been almost impossible for him and Flaming Bar to end up in a draw. After Flaming Bar had become a second-tier god, she had actually completely assimilated with her original body. In the end, she was only left with 9 lotus seeds. If she had enough time, she could have refined these 9 lotus seeds into her own natal god weapon. Its power would have been even greater than the god of killing, Shupness' sword. Unfortunately, Flaming Bar no longer had the chance to do so. Before her godly spirit was shattered, she had left these 9 lotus seeds for Ji Dong. It could be said that these were 9 god-tier lotus seeds. If it had not been for the divine sense that Flaming Bar had left in the lotus seeds, even a god would not have been able to digest her lotus seeds, let alone Ji Dong. Because of this, even Flaming Bar herself did not know to what extent these 9 lotus seeds could help Ji Dong to improve. What she could be sure of was that her natal lotus seeds would definitely not harm Ji Dong. After sleeping for more than 8 months, the energy in the natal red lotus seeds had truly merged with Ji Dong's body. When Ji Dong had faced the Dark Death Guards, he had forcefully controlled his body to kill the last 5 Dark Death Guards. At that time, he had displayed the strength of a martial sage. After 8 months, he had truly completed the integration with the natal red lotus seed. His strength had been elevated to the high level of the saint level, and he was only a hair's breadth away from Dark Tianji. Li Yonghao's previous feeling was not wrong. While Ji Dong possessed a high-level saint-level cultivation, his soul cultivation had also reached the peak of the saint level, just like He Tianji. It could be said that the Flaming Bar had given him all of this. If he had a choice, Ji Dong would never want the Flaming Bar's natal red lotus seed to completely merge with him. This was the last memento that the Flaming Bar had left for him. Hence, even though his strength had reached such a level, he could not bring himself to be happy at all. Ever since he had woken up from his slumber, he had remained silent. Chun Sichuan, who was by his side, could clearly sense the deep sense of loss in his heart. If it had not been for the impending holy war between the 2 mainlands, he might have returned to his previous state of isolation. Although the dark heavenly stem saints were powerful and had all attributes, how could they stand a chance against Ji Dong, who was a high-level saint? If he had not been absolutely confident, Ji Dong would not have stopped them here. The holy war had already begun, and he wanted to eliminate all uncertainties and complete the holy war perfectly. Li Yonghao's breathing became a little rapid. His emotions were no longer stable as he sensed the magnificent and invincible aura on Ji Dong's body. He knew very well what it meant to have a god weapon destroyed. The saint-level Ji Dong had completely exceeded the realm that he could deal with. There was no doubt that Ji Dong was now qualified to challenge Dark Tianji. However, if he really killed Dark Tianji alone, then the end of the 5 elements mainland would come. Li Yonghao was indeed the dark heavenly stem saint. In a short period of time, he had already broken free from the intense shock in his heart. His figure flashed, and he returned to the back of his black dragon. He shouted in a deep voice, "Dark heavenly stem saints, yin-yang boundary of the 5 elements." In an instant, A multicolored light rose from the bodies of the 10 dark heavenly stemmed saints, and the light pillars intertwined in the air. Although Li Yonghao had lost his god weapon, his cultivation was the strongest among the dark heavenly stem saints. Losing the Gung metal divine sword did not affect his ability to command the dark heavenly stem saints. The yin-yang boundary of the 5 elements released by the dark heavenly stem saints at their peak was much more powerful than the one that the radiant saints had used to deal with the dark guards. This was because the light heavenly stem saints didn't have Ji Dong to command them at that time, but the dark heavenly stem saints didn't only have Li Yonghao, the holy king, but they had also integrated the mana of their mounts into the 5 elements yin-yang world. With Ji Dong's cultivation base, he did not even need to observe carefully to discover that the dark heavenly stem saints did not know the 5 elements formation. However, in the next moment, he discovered that the dark heavenly stem saints were stronger than the radiant saints. Starting from Li Yonghao, the yin-yang crown above the heads of every dark heavenly stem saint changed slightly. A faint layer of light mist was released from their yin-yang crowns, and demonic patterns blossomed above their heads. These light patterns rapidly integrated into the yin-yang boundary of the 5 elements, making the multicolored boundary look like an extremely exquisite work of art. Of course, these light patterns were not as simple as they looked. To Ji Dong's surprise, they were actually the respective demon domains of the dark heavenly stem saints. That's right, given his peak saint tier soul cultivation base, he would not be mistaken. That was definitely the aura of the demon domains. The dark heavenly stem saints had actually integrated the demon domains with the yin-yang boundary of the 5 elements. There is no doubt that in this state, their respective powers would be able to fuse more perfectly. Ji Dong was not in a hurry to attack. The actions of the dark heavenly stem saints had given him a lot of inspiration. He wanted to see how far they could go. Given his current strength, even if he could not defeat his opponents, he could still retreat unscathed. If he really wanted to deal with these dark heavenly stem saints, he would only need to launch a few simple sneak attacks to easily defeat them. After all, they were not on the same level, and the dark heavenly stem saints were not as elusive as the light heavenly stem saints. The 10 elemental light patterns and the yin-yang boundary of the 5 elements fused perfectly. Li Yonghao was at the forefront, and the other dark heavenly stem saints formed a circle with him. The 10 elemental totems behind them gradually solidified, and soon after, these huge illusory shadows actually slowly moved forward and devoured their bodies and mounts. Ji Dong was surprised to discover that he actually saw the 10 elemental dark heavenly stem divine beasts appear again. Moreover, the mana fluctuations of these 10 elemental divine beasts were even stronger than those of the real dark heavenly stem divine beasts. Li Yonghao was really a genius. At this moment, Ji Dong had vaguely understood what these dark heavenly stem saints were doing. They actually used the 5 elements yin-yang world as a breeding mother, and then released their own devilish domains, completely condensing the devilish domains, completely fusing with themselves and their mounts, and finally appearing in the form of the dark heavenly stem divine beasts. There was no doubt that such an improvement, at least for now, surpassed the 5 elements array of the light heavenly stem saints. Of course, this was under the premise that the light heavenly stem saints had yet to fully comprehend the 5 elements array. In terms of commanding the saints and cooperating with them, Ji Dong felt that he could not compare to Li Yonghao. At least, he had never been able to develop a set of combat skills that was completely suitable for the light heavenly stem saints. Even the 5-element cycle array was more suitable for ordinary wizards because it was not flexible enough and could not play the role of a magical beast mount. However, Li Yonghao had achieved this. Ji Dong knew that if he had not had several fortuitous encounters and had not had the enhancement of the flaming bar's natal lotus seed, he might not have been able to match up to this ultimate weapon in terms of strength. The ultimate weapon was indeed the ultimate weapon. If I'm not wrong, the array that you're using in front of you should be prepared for dark heavenly secrets, right? Can you tell me what's called? Ji Dong asked. The yin-yang boundary of the 5 elements was not as simple as a breeding array. It had a strong defense, and even if Ji Dong launched an attack, it would be a problem for him to break through it in a short period of time. It could be said that the array that Li Yonghao had led the dark heavenly stem saints to set up was almost perfect in a sense. It made perfect use of every bit of the dark heavenly stem saint's strength, and also perfectly merged the 5 elements, yin-yang, and 10 attributes into one. Li Yonghao's deep voice came from the yin-yang boundary of the 5 elements. That's right, you're right. I prepared this array for dark heavenly secrets. I'll only practice with my partners when I can ensure that he's not around. This is the first time I'm using it in a real battle. I didn't expect that its first opponent would not be dark heavenly secrets, but the radiant sage king. This array is called the 10 Transformations Heavenly Stem Sacred Destruction Array. Ji Dong smiled. Sacred destruction. That means I'm going to destroy a Saint-grade powerhouse. It seems like you're very confident in this array. Li Yonghao said in a deep voice, if the first opponent of my 10 Transformations Heavenly Stem Sacred Destruction Array is the Radiant Sage King, then the 15 years I spent researching this array was not in vain. Ji Dong, how about we make a bet? If you can break this array, we'll leave the battlefield completely and not participate in this holy war. After the holy war, you can kill or plunder as you please. If you can't break this array, you might even be injured by it. In that case, I want you to join forces with me to kill Darkness Tianji. Ji Dong was stunned. You still want me to make a bet with you at a time like this? You should know what the flaw of your 10 Transformations Heavenly Stem Sacred Destruction Array is. Li Yonghao said, yes, I'm well aware that our greatest flaw is that we can't maintain this array forever. With a Saint-grade powerhouse like you, it's entirely possible that I won't be able to establish this array a second time. I also understand that it's already impossible to rule the Radiant 5 Elements continent. I just hope that through this bet, we can settle for the next best thing. After we kill dark heavenly secrets, we can build a barrier that separates the 2 continents. If you're really thinking for the sake of the people and civilians of the 2 continents like you said earlier, you should agree to my suggestion. On the surface, the outcome of Li Yonghao's bet seemed to be the same. Ji Dong won, and his goal was still to kill dark heavenly secrets. Even if he lost, he would still have to cooperate with the dark heavenly stem saints to kill dark heavenly secrets. There didn't seem to be any difference. However, Ji Dong knew very well that this was a matter of dominance. Who could be sure that the dark heavenly stem saints wouldn't turn around and attack dark heavenly secrets at the last moment? Even Ji Dong didn't have the slightest confidence in dealing with dark heavenly secrets. Ji Dong didn't think too much about it. He nodded and said, if I can't destroy your 10 Transformations Heavenly Stem Sacred Destruction Array, I naturally won't be able to stop you from heading to the battlefield. Your bet is very fair. Since that's the case, let me see the power of your formation. Li Yonghao sighed inwardly. His ambition had been shattered the moment the Gung Metal Divine Sword had been broken. At that time, he had felt an intense sense of helplessness. He could still accept it when dark heavenly secrets had advanced to the pinnacle of the martial saint realm, and he could still see dark heavenly secrets as his goal. However, now that he saw that Ji Dong's cultivation had also advanced to the martial saint realm, the desire to fight for supremacy in his heart gradually dissipated. He knew that at this moment, he was no longer at the pinnacle of the 2 continents. Regardless of whether dark heavenly secrets or Ji Dong won, he wouldn't have any possibility of claiming supremacy. Under such circumstances, he naturally hoped that the final victor would be Ji Dong and not dark heavenly secrets. This was because dark heavenly secrets was a lunatic, and during his battle with Ji Dong earlier, he had clearly sensed the faint aura on Ji Dong's body. Back when he had first met Ji Dong, his domineering aura seemed to have disappeared, and what replaced it was an unfathomable calmness. Although this Ji Dong was even more terrifying, Li Yonghao could also be sure that everything Ji Dong had said before was very likely true. Even if he couldn't dominate both continents, he could still defend the Darkness continent. At the very least, Li Yonghao still had some good intentions in his heart. The Darkness continent really needed to recuperate. Under such circumstances, Li Yonghao would only propose this dispensable bet. He also knew that it was impossible for Ji Dong to completely trust him. If both Ji Dong and Dark Heavenly Secrets were seriously injured, how could Li Yonghao not make a move on the battlefield? He would let the 10 Changes Heavenly Stem Sacred Extermination formation that he was most proud of decide everything in this battle. After Li Yonghao said his last sentence, the bodies of the Darkness Heavenly Stem Saints disappeared, and only the 10 Darkness Heavenly Stem Divine Beasts that were formed from the fusion of the Darkness Heavenly Stem Saints and their mounts remained in the 5-element yin-yang realm. Each of the Darkness Heavenly Stem Divine Beasts was emitting extremely intense magical waves and the glow of extreme magical power. At this moment, the devilish domain light patterns released by the 10 Darkness Heavenly Stem Saints began to fuse in the 5-element yin-yang realm. Chapter 667. Within the yin-yang world of the 5 elements that the Darkness Heavenly Stem Saints had jointly laid down, the strange demonic patterns formed by the 10 Darkness Saints' demonic domains had completely fused with the yin-yang world of the 5 elements. What was even more bizarre was that the 10 Darkness Heavenly Stem Divine Beasts that had appeared within the yin-yang world of the 5 elements were the Darkness Azure Dragon, Darkness 6 Directions, Darkness Vermilion Bird, Darkness Winged Serpent, Darkness Sky, Darkness Celestial Unity, Darkness White Tiger, Darkness Extreme Yin, Darkness Empress, and Darkness Black Tortoise. Right now, even Ji Dong, who had a peak Saint-grade soul cultivation base, was unable to grasp the complex demonic power within the yin-yang 5-element boundary. What a powerful formation. Ji Dong was secretly shocked. After all, the Radiant Heavenly Saints wouldn't be able to form such a powerful formation even if they joined forces. Ji Dong didn't know how powerful the formation that Li Yonghao had led the Dark Heavenly Saints to set up was, but he could tell its flaws with a single glance. The most direct flaw was the speed limit of the formation. When the formation was activated, it would be in a completely defensive state and would need a long time to accumulate power. If Ji Dong didn't want to fight this battle, he could immediately leave the battlefield. The Dark Heavenly Saints formation naturally wouldn't have any effect on him. Therefore, their 10 Changes Heavenly Stem Sacred Extermination formation could only display its power under special circumstances, such as now. Just as Ji Dong was carefully sensing the mysteries of the 10 Transformations Sacred Extermination formation, suddenly, the Dark Heavenly Divine Beasts formed by the 10 Dark Heavenly Saints moved at the same time. However, they didn't attack Ji Dong. Instead, they charged towards the center of the yin-yang 5-element boundary. Were they actually going to clash against each other? Ji Dong couldn't help but feel a little curious. He couldn't predict what the Dark Heavenly Saints were going to do. However, in the next moment, an even more shocking scene appeared. The 10 Dark Heavenly Divine Beasts formed by the Dark Heavenly Saints collided at the center of the yin-yang 5-element boundary. In an instant, their bodies disappeared once again, leaving behind a huge, multicolored cloud of light. At the same time, the yin-yang 5-element boundary that was filled with demonic patterns shrunk and enveloped the cloud of light almost instantly. All the huge mana fluctuations from before had converged into the multicolored sphere of light that was only 5 meters in diameter. Ji Dong's expression also became solemn at this moment, because the mana fluctuations emitted by the sphere of light made him feel a real threat towards him. It was no wonder that Li Yonghao had been so confident in his formation. Now it seemed that it was indeed profound. He wondered what kind of power it would unleash. Just as Ji Dong was thinking, the 10-colored halo suddenly shrank, as if it had shrunk into a single point, and then suddenly exploded, appearing in front of Ji Dong. It had already turned pitch black, and a 3-meter-tall figure silently appeared in the void. She was 3 meters tall, and her lower body was a huge fishtail that was covered in black scales. Her upper body was that of an almost perfect beauty. Her long, ocean blue wavy hair was draped over her back. Apart from her chest, which was also covered by black scales, the rest of her upper body revealed her fair and delicate skin. Mermaid? No, of course, this was not a simple mermaid, because she was the empress of the 10 divine totem beasts. Be it the Light Empress or the Dark Empress, They were both in this form. However, the Empress in front of Ji-dong was obviously very different from the real Empress of Darkness. The difference was that Ji-dong was facing a saint-rank Empress. And judging from the mana fluctuation she was releasing, she had actually reached the level of a middle-rank saint-rank Empress, which was only a hair's breadth away from Ji-dong's current mana. The 10 became 1, transforming into the Empress? Ji-dong's gaze sharpened instantly. Although he already had a high opinion of Li Yonghao's array formation, he really hadn't expected Li Yonghao to bring him such a huge surprise. Although he wasn't sure how long the array formation could last, the fact that it could integrate the power of the Dark Stem Saints and unleash the power of a middle-rank saint through the array formation made Li Yonghao qualified to challenge the Dark Fate Saint. It was no wonder that he dared to operate an organization like the Dark Fate Saint. He was indeed the Dark Stem Saint. At that moment, the Dark Empress in the air moved. Her slender, 3-meter-tall figure appeared in front of Ji-dong in a flash. Her slender body swayed slightly, and her huge fishtail whipped towards Ji-dong's body. Intense waves of Water Element 9 burst forth instantly. Although it was just a close-range attack, it made Ji-dong feel like a stormy sea. Without a doubt, Li Yonghao had chosen to use the array formation to transform into the Heavenly Empress 9 Water Element Totem specifically to deal with Ji-dong. Among the 5 elements, Water subdued Fire and Water Element 9 subdued Fire. He was making use of the power of these elements. Ji-dong's expression changed slightly. Facing the Heavenly Empress 9 Water Element wouldn't be as simple as facing Li Yonghao. Ji-dong's right leg swept out like a whip, instantly colliding with the Heavenly Empress fishtail in the air. It was the most direct mana contact. Amidst the loud bang, Ji-dong remained motionless, while the Heavenly Empress 9 Waters' huge fishtail swayed. Ji-dong's kick had the effect of the God-slaying strike. However, what surprised him was that when he used the God-slaying strike to inject mana into the opponent's body, he felt a void. In this void, there was a kind of perfect power that bounced the magic power that he had attacked, just like that. Although he had blocked the opponent's attack, the God-slaying strike didn't have any effect. Amidst the loud bang, the mana exploded outside the Heavenly Empress 9 Water. In an instant, Ji-dong understood. On the surface, it seemed like he was facing the Heavenly Empress 9 Water, but in reality, the opponent in front of him had the essence of the fusion of the 5 elements, yin-yang boundary, and the mana that rushed into his body was the extreme cold of the extreme Water Element 9 Water. It seemed that the 10 transformations Heavenly Stem Sacred Extermination Array was more tyrannical than he had imagined. Although the Heavenly Empress 9 Water was blocked by Ji-dong's kick, her movements didn't slow down at all. Her 3-meter-long slender body swayed in the air along with her fishtail. Her hands were like knives, hanging onto Hyoheim's shoulders. A cold light flashed in Ji-dong's eyes. Facing the opponent's attack, he didn't retreat. Instead, he took a step forward in the void and raised his hands at the same time to block the opponent's attack. At the same time, he lowered his shoulders and slammed into the Heavenly Empress 9 Water's chest. He didn't see the Heavenly Empress 9 Water as a woman. Not to mention the fact that the Heavenly Stem Saint of the 9th Water Element was a man, but the body in front of him was an illusion. Ji-dong's movements were smooth and fast. In terms of cultivation, the Heavenly Empress 9 Water was inferior. The combination of speed and strength, coupled with Ji-dong's powerful close combat ability, this extremely ingenious attack had an immediate effect. The Heavenly Empress 9 Water's palms were blocked by Ji-dong, and it looked like they were about to be pierced through. She hurriedly retracted her arms and crossed them in front of her chest to block Ji-dong's attack. This time, Ji-dong had stored up power, and the opponent had reacted in a panic. In an instant, it was clear who was superior. With a loud bang, the Heavenly Empress 9 Water's body was sent flying. When faced with an enemy, Tyrant had never shown mercy. Moreover, explosive attacks were his forte. Ji-dong's body instantly accelerated in the air. His entire body was like a meteor as he rushed forward. He raised his right leg high and made a chopping motion with a battle axe. His entire body, which was wearing the divine flame Saint King armor, had turned completely red. The golden light that surrounded his body had completely condensed on his right leg. When Jidong woke up from his deep sleep, he could already truly control the power of light. In the air, the heavenly Empress Nine Water had already lost control of her body. Her beautiful face couldn't help but change. Jidong's attacks looked simple, but in reality, each of his attacks was like a mountain. Not to mention the difference in magic power between the two sides. Even if the heavenly Empress Nine Water was a high-level saint rank cultivator, she still wouldn't be able to win. That's right, the ninth water could restrain the third fire, but don't forget that Jidong didn't just have the third fire. He had two types of fire. How could the ninth water empress be able to restrain him? At this time, something unexpected happened to Jidong. He saw that the heavenly Empress Nine Water would definitely be heavily injured by his attack, and that she might even break the formation. But suddenly, the heavenly Empress Nine Water changed. The heavenly Empress Nine Water's black scales suddenly turned dark gray. Immediately after, her entire body underwent an illusory transformation. Her body that was originally 3 meters long suddenly expanded to 5 meters. Just before Jidong's attack arrived, she had already transformed into a three-eyed whale. Her heavy body suddenly swayed, and her fishtail swung upwards, just in time to meet Jidong's downward attack. Amidst a loud bang, the three-eyed whale was directly struck by Jidong's attack and fell 100 meters into the air. However, Jidong could clearly feel that his attack had actually failed to break through the opponent's defense and severely injure it. This three-eyed whale was the earth element totem divine beast, Tianyi. Among the 10 types of magic power, the ones that were most adept at defense were naturally the earth element and earth element. In theory, the earth element, as the yang element, should have a stronger frontal defense. However, among the heavenly stem divine beasts, the earth element, Tianyi, had a stronger defense than the earth element, Sky. Sky was a large silver bird that was more adept at flying. Although its defense was also very strong, it lacked Tianyi's flexibility. In terms of supply, Sky's attacks far surpassed Tianyi's, but in terms of defense, Tianyi was fully deserving of being the strongest among the dark stem divine beasts. He first used the earth element divine beast, Heavenly Empress, to attack Hyoheim, and then used the earth element divine beast, Tianyi, to defend against Jidong's attack. The true profoundness of the 10 transformations, heavenly stem, sacred, exterminating formation had been displayed. There was no doubt that the true profoundness of the 10 transformations, heavenly stem, sacred, exterminating formation, lay in the transformation. Now that the profoundness had been revealed, as the leader of the 10 transformations, heavenly stem, sacred, exterminating formation, Li Yonghao naturally wouldn't hold anything back. A sharp bird's cry rang out, and Tianyi, who was falling from the sky, once again rose up. However, this time, he had turned into a large silver bird Sky. Amidst the ear-piercing cry, his huge body instantly returned in front of Jidong. His right wing blasted out like lightning, and the sides of his wings were as sharp as blades, slashing at Hyoheim's neck. The miraculous transformation of the 10 transformations, heavenly stem, sacred, exterminating formation, had indeed caused Jidong a lot of trouble. Naturally, he had different ways of dealing with magic of different attributes. However, his opponent was of the earth element just a moment ago, and in the blink of an eye, it had turned into the earth element and then into the earth element. The feeling of using the wrong force immediately made Jidong feel very uncomfortable. At the same time that Sky launched his attack, Jidong immediately felt a powerful binding force around his body. The enormous pressure felt as though it was about to crush his body. In Jidong's memory, Sky, a heavenly stem divine beast, had a special innate skill called Void Trap. As an earth element divine beast, it had a pair of wings that separated it from the ground. Naturally, Sky had its own special ability. He could control the earth element in the air and form a cage trap at any place. This kind of trap was directly connected to the earth element between heaven and earth. If he couldn't break it in an instant, then the power of the trap would grow stronger and stronger, and he would never be able to break it. This was the advantage of being a magic attribute totem. There was no doubt that Sky had already used his innate skill when Hyoheim launched her attack. Ji-dong's body suddenly rotated, and his whole body was like a rising dragon. The void trap that was binding him was suddenly shattered by the enormous force, and Sky's silver wings were also pushed to the side, causing his body to become unstable in the air. What Ji-dong had used was one of the two sovereign skills, Blazing Sun Whirlwind. With his current cultivation, the might of this skill was not any weaker than the Flame Tyrant King's. How could it be restricted by Sky's attack and binding? However, at this moment, the sky changed again, and the surrounding space seemed to have collapsed. Contrary to the previous hardness, a soft and delicate aura, like maggots and bones, entangled Hyoheim's moving body. A giant purple tortoise appeared out of thin air and turned into countless intense purple light ribbons, trapping Ji-dong within. This time, it was the Gui water totem divine beast, Black Tortoise. As soon as he broke out of the cage, the fire element magic released from Ji-dong's body suddenly encountered the cold, weak water of Gui water. The uncomfortable feeling made him somewhat unable to struggle out of the weak water. At this moment, the Blazing Sun Whirlwind had also completed its activation, and Ji-dong's body was trapped in the weak water and suddenly became sluggish. The collapsed void became firm again at this moment, and the Sky Empress, who appeared first, had once again transformed. However, this time, she was holding a cold ice spear in her hand. Chapter 668. As the Goddess Nine Water quietly appeared behind Ji-dong, the ice spear in her hand stabbed towards Ji-dong's back. There was no doubt that the constant changes of these dark, heavenly stem divine beasts, especially their various ultimate attributes, brought Ji-dong a lot of trouble. The moment the Goddess Nine Water appeared behind Ji-dong, he had already sensed it. After all, the 10 transformations, Heavenly Stem, Sacred Extermination Formation couldn't hide from his peak Saint-grade soul cultivation base. However, the previous gloomy coldness had yet to disappear, and the chilly chi had reappeared, restraining Ji-dong's dual fire magical powers as much as possible. There was no doubt that Li Yonghao had decided to use the dual water magical powers to counter his dual fire magical powers. However, the Goddess Nine Water's spear, which she had thought would definitely succeed, was still stuck in the air. Ji-dong's originally sluggish body actually shifted forward by 100 meters in an instant. It had to be known that he was still under the influence of the innate ability of the Black Tortoise of the Gui Water Heavenly Stem Divine Beast, so his mobility should have been greatly reduced. The Goddess Nine Water was stunned for a moment, but Ji-dong's body had already turned around. At the same time, Ji-dong's palm struck the void. Li Yonghao was already frightened by Ji-dong's power, especially after he had used some unknown method to dodge his sure-kill attack. The Goddess Nine Water hurriedly dodged to the side, afraid that Ji-dong would use some special attack. However, Ji-dong's palm wasn't as simple as it seemed. The sky suddenly shook violently, and then 2 overlapping light wheels appeared behind him. One was black and the other was white, and there were strange patterns on them. As soon as they appeared, all the fire elements in the air swarmed towards his body like rivers flowing into the sea. Then, the 2 halos fused into one and turned into a Tai Chi Yin and Yang magic pattern halo that appeared behind Ji-dong's back. Even though Li Yonghao and his partners relied on the 10 transformations Sacred Annihilation Formation to restrain the fire elements in the formation and prevent them from leaking, it was no longer possible for them to absorb any fire elements from the outside world. The Tai Chi Yin-Yang fish that appeared from the fusion of these 2 halos was Ji-dong's Tai Chi Demon Domain. With the power of the Tai Chi Demonic Domain, Ji-dong easily controlled all the fire elements within 100 miles. Although it was impossible to absorb all the fire elements in an instant, it was impossible for others to absorb them. After exchanging a few blows, Ji-dong discovered that the 10 transformation Heavenly Stem Sacred Destruction Formation invented by Li Yonghao was indeed mysterious. Not only could it continuously transform into various kinds of totem beasts to launch attacks, but it could also rely on the transformation of attributes and the strength of a mid-level martial saint to destroy the opponent. Meanwhile, because this formation had all 10 elements and had the 5 elemental yin-yang boundary as its foundation, it had always been absorbing the 10 elements in the air to replenish itself. This way, this formation could rely on the advantage of having all 10 elements to absorb all kinds of elements and extremely fast speed to last for a long time. Previously, when Ji Dong dodged the attack of the Heaven Queen 9, he relied on the Spirit Annihilation attraction. As his cultivation advanced to the Martial Saint realm, his control over all his abilities was not as simple as before. His Spirit Annihilation attraction could be used directly in the void and change the position of his body through the suction of the void. This allowed him to dodge the attack of the Heaven Queen 9 easily. At the same time, he activated the Tai Chi Demon Domain. If the overall demonic power of the 10 transformation Heavenly Stem Sacred Destruction formation far exceeded that of Ji Dong, perhaps Ji Dong's Tai Chi Demon Domain would not be able to affect it. Unfortunately, Ji Dong's demonic power was above theirs. Moreover, the Tai Chi Demon Domain used the Fire of Chaos as its source. Now that it was released, it was not something that the 10 transformation Heavenly Stem Sacred Destruction formation could contend against. Suddenly, 2 of the 10 attributes of demonic power were missing. Without a doubt, this brought great trouble to the 10 transformation Heavenly Stem Sacred Destruction formation. It was not the 5-element symbiosis, so it could not create and amplify 2 types of fire attribute demonic power out of thin air. Without the support of 2 types of elemental attributes, the time that this tyrannical formation could maintain would be greatly reduced. Ji Dong was trying to disintegrate this formation from its roots. Even if he could not break the formation would break on its own due to the lack of sufficient demonic power to support it. Of course, this would require a process. Ji Dong and Li Yonghao, these 2 great holy kings, had each created a formation. Although they were different routes, they both achieved the same goal. Both of their formations were applied to the 10 attributes. However, what was different was their emphasis. It could be said that they each excelled in the application of the 10 attributes. On the surface, the 10 transformation Heavenly Stem Sacred Destruction formation that Li Yonghao led the Dark Stem Saints to display was much stronger than Ji Dong's 5-element symbiosis and circulation formation. It could actually exert the power of a martial saint. But in reality, this was not the case. Although the 10 transformation Heavenly Stem Sacred Destruction formation was powerful, it also had many restrictions. Moreover, this formation could only be used by the Dark Stem Saints themselves because only they could rely on the power of the saints to release the 5 elements Yin and Yang world and release the corresponding demon domain. After all, Li Yonghao had designed this formation based on the Dark Stem Saints, and it could be considered as a work of painstaking effort. Although Ji Dong's 5-element symbiosis and circulation formation had its limitations, it could not be used with mounts or the demon domain. However, its greatest advantage was its universality. Any demon master could use it as long as they gathered all 10 attributes and were guided by the soul of a supreme expert. Moreover, through the symbiosis and circulation formation, the 10 transformation Heavenly Stem Sacred Destruction formation would not face the embarrassment of lacking a single attribute. Therefore, when comparing these 2 formations, it could only be said that they each had their own advantages. Wasn't the Army of Light relying on Ji Dong's 5-element symbiosis and circulation formation to barely resist the Dark Demon Army? Li Yonghao, who was in the 10 transformation Heavenly Stem Sacred Destruction formation, could not help but feel a chill in his heart when he suddenly felt the effect of Ji Dong's Tai Chi Demon Domain. Ji Dong's strength was stronger than he had imagined. Although he had already judged that Ji Dong's cultivation was at the martial saint level, It was only after he used the 10 transformation heavenly stem sacred destruction formation that he felt that Ji Dong's cultivation was at the high-level martial saint level. He really did not understand how Ji Dong could have such a huge breakthrough in such a short period of time. This was completely beyond his imagination. However, at this time, he still had to face such a powerful Ji Dong. The longer the battle dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for the Dark Stem Saints. Therefore, while Ji Dong was using the Tai Chi demon domain to weaken the enemy and replenish himself, the Heaven Empress Nine Water had already rushed towards him again. The Heaven Empress figure changed again in the air, turning into a 6 combination flower full of vitality. The pure white petals stretched out in the air, and the extremely rich Ewood magic was completely dispersed in the air. Suddenly, the fire attribute magic in the air became stronger under the effect of Wood giving birth to fire. With the help of the Tai Chi demon domain, Ji Dong's magic was already recovering quickly. With the effect of the Ewood 6 combination flower, he quickly recovered a trace of magic that he had previously consumed. But at this time, he could not help but be stunned. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. This was because after his body was filled with magic, although the Tai Chi demon domain could still restrain the fire element in the air, it could no longer restrain all the waves of the fire element. After all, without a place to store the fire element, it was impossible to control all the fire element within 100 miles just by absorbing it. Li Yonghao was indeed a genius. He actually used the method of helping the enemy generate magic to absorb the excess fire element to replenish himself. Even Ji Dong was amazed by such a wonderful idea. Moreover, he did not attack the Ewood 6 combination flower. It was not only because the flower was very similar to the one that Qin Sichuan often released. At the same time, it was also because he knew who the origin of the Ewood 6 combination flower was. The relationship between Ji Dong and the dark Ewood Saint Scorpion was a little complicated. Ji Dong did not have any ill feelings toward Scorpion, and the two of them had even cooperated during the first battle of Holy and Evil to resist a strong enemy together. Looking at this 6 combination flower, he could not help but recall the situation when he participated in the first battle of Holy and Evil. The moment the 6 combination flower activated the fire element magic in the air to replenish the 10 changes heavenly stem sacred extermination formation, it had already changed again. However, Ji Dong was a little surprised that this time it did not transform into the 9th Water Empress, who had strong attributes against Ji Dong, but the 6th Earth Tianyi, who was known for its defense. What was Li Yonghao trying to do? No matter how he looked at it, they were now mainly attacking and should not be replaced by a heavenly stem divine beast that was good at defense. Just as Ji Dong was feeling puzzled, the answer had already appeared. Tianyi had the appearance of a whale, but it had 3 eyes, so it was also called the 3-eyed whale. The moment it appeared, its 3 eyes had already lit up at the same time, and a circle of pale yellow light was released from Tianyi's 3 eyes at the same time, instantly enveloping Ji Dong's body. Ji Dong felt dizzy, and his soul power that was at the peak of the saint level was instantly compressed in his brain, and the extremely clear detection of his surroundings suddenly disappeared. Soul Seal? Tianyi's innate skill turned out to be Soul Seal. Ji Dong actually did not know much about the Heavenly Stem Divine Beasts. The Heavenly Stem Divine Beasts that he had seen were mainly the Vermilion Bird and the Flying Serpent. He only knew the strengths of the various Heavenly Stem Divine Beasts, but he did not expect that the 6th Earth Tianyi, which was not good at attacking, would actually have such an ability. Those 3 eyes were not for nothing. If it was the real Dark Tianyi, this Soul Seal would naturally not have any effect on Ji Dong, who was at the peak of the saint level. However, the 6th Earth Tianyi in front of him was transformed by Li Yonghao and the others using the 10 changes Heavenly Stem Sacred Extermination formation, and it had the strength of a mid-level saint. In this way, its Soul Seal, which it was best at, had an effect on Ji Dong. With his soul sealed, no matter how strong he was, he could not exert his strength. Tianyi's huge body had already arrived in front of Ji Dong, and its fat body fiercely slammed into Ji Dong's body, instantly sending Ji-dong's body flying. It was like a cannonball. However, at the same time that Ji-dong was sent flying, Tianyi let out a shrill cry. Its huge body suddenly shook, and the sound of metal colliding was heard. Tianyi, who had such a strong defense, actually had an additional white mark on its body. Ji-dong was sent flying by it, but its body also slowed down for a moment. At this moment, Li Yonghao displayed his strong combat awareness. Although Tianyi's body was slowed down, the formation changed at the same time. The sixth Earth Tianyi transformed into the Gungjin White Tiger. An extremely strong and sharp aura had already caught up with Ji-dong. The White Tiger's body, driven by this sharp aura, once again launched a charge and arrived in front of Ji-dong. At this moment, the soul seal on Ji-dong had just been lifted. If Li Yonghao's reaction had been a little slower, the opportunity to pursue and attack would have disappeared. How could Ji-dong, who had such a strong soul power, be sealed for such a long time? This was the first time that the Ten Changes Heavenly Stem Sacred Extermination Formation had transformed into a white tiger, and the white tiger was the Gungjin totem, which was Li Yonghao's attribute. When the white tiger pounced on Hyoheim, it had already used the three innate abilities that it was good at: the blade of atmosphere, the steel of vacuum, and the silver tooth. Among them, the blade of atmosphere was the sharp aura that chased after Ji-dong. Not only did it instantly collide with Ji-dong's body, but it also guided the Gungjin White Tiger's body to increase its speed to the limit. Its effect was somewhat similar to Ji-dong's God Extermination Attraction. The steel of vacuum was reflected in the tiger's claws that slapped Hyoheim, and the silver tooth directly bit Hyoheim's head. These actions could be said to have been completed in one go, without any pause. Although Ji-dong's cultivation was higher than the Ten Changes Heavenly Stem Sacred Extermination Formation's transformation of the Divine Beast, his blood and qi were in turmoil when he was hit by Tianyi just now. As for why Tianyi's body produced a clanging sound, it was because of the profoundness of the Fire Divine Sword. After the Fire Divine Sword completed its final evolution, it had completely integrated with Ji-dong's body. It could be said that Ji-dong's body was the sword, and the sword was his body. In terms of physical strength, he had completely stepped into the pinnacle of the martial sage stage. This was also the reason why Ji-dong could face these dark heavenly stem saints in such a calm manner. Even if he stood there without moving and let these dark heavenly stem saints attack him, they would not be able to hurt him before the formation was activated. Moreover, they would also suffer the backlash of the Fire Divine Sword sharpness. However, it was different for the dark heavenly stem divine beasts, especially the Gungjin White Tiger, which had the sharpest attack power. If he were to be hit by its all-out attack, even Ji-dong's physique at the pinnacle of the martial sage stage would be injured. His blood and qi were in turmoil, and he regained control of his body. Ji-dong's actions were also the most direct. At this moment, he could no longer dodge. He simply ignored Li Yonghao's other attacks and punched his chest with his right fist straight at the Gungjin White Tiger. The aura in his body was also adjusted in this short moment. Chapter 669. The metal heptagold White Tiger's blade of air shattered upon meeting Ji-dong's fist, followed by the metal heptagold White Tiger's claws. Ji-dong's punch was not a casual one. He had a very clear judgment that the metal heptagold White Tiger's claws were much faster than the silver tooth, so he only needed to face the tiger's claws. Li Yonghao also had his own judgment. When he saw Ji-dong's punch, he knew that the silver tooth didn't stand chance. He instantly transferred all his mana to the tiger's claws, which were covered by the metal heptagold White Tiger's claws, and collided with Ji-dong's fist in the air. In any case, Ji-dong had just been sent flying by Tianyi, so he definitely couldn't go all out with that punch. Boom! When Ji-dong's fist collided with the metal heptagold White Tiger's claws, heaven and earth changed color, and a terrifying mana fluctuation erupted in the air like a tornado. This time, Ji-dong and the metal heptagold White Tiger flew back almost at the same time, and the metal heptagold White Tiger even let out a muffled groan. The gauntlet of Ji Dong's divine Fire Sage King armor also had more than 10 white marks left by the metal heptagold white tiger. Under the intense collision, neither side felt good. After Ji Dong's body stabilized, he didn't rush to attack. He was not in a hurry to attack. Instead, he clapped his hands. The clapping sound stunned the Gungjin white tiger. It's a real formation. It's a good formation indeed. If the dark heavenly secrets were to encounter your 10 transformations heavenly stem sacred extermination formation when they were injured to a certain extent, it might really be destroyed. Brotherly truly deserves the title of the ultimate weapon. You've already done the best you can as a saint ruler. However, it's time for us to end this battle. That's because I have to go to the front lines earlier. Just now, you've already shown me the profoundness of the 10 transformations heavenly stem sacred extermination formation. Now, I'm going to start attacking. Ji Dong's voice carried a tinge of admiration and distance. It sounded like a discussion between friends. However, his words caused Li Yonghao's heart to sink when he heard them. Yes, in the previous battle, Ji Dong clearly had the opportunity to attack, but he did not seize the opportunity to do so. It turned out that he had deliberately wanted to see what the profoundness of the 10 transformations heavenly stem sacred extermination formation was. How strong was his confidence? Come on, let me see what level your strength has reached. Li Yonghao's somewhat gloomy voice sounded. In the next moment, the Gungjin white tiger's body had already changed back into the Earth Tianyi, which was the best at defense. It was also at this moment that Ji Dong's aura completely changed. Even though he had already donned the Godfire Saint King armor, he still seemed to be taking a stroll in the park. However, at this moment, an explosive and tyrannical aura burst forth from his body. A powerful oppressive force accompanied by an unparalleled, ruthless aura spread wildly. The air within a radius of 100 miles fluctuated violently. It seemed to be trembling because of the violence he was displaying. With a swoosh, the wings on Ji Dong's back unfurled, and the golden light emitted from his body was at least 3 times stronger than before. His entire spirit had already risen to a level that even the dark heavenly stem holy disciples could only look up to. In the next moment, his body was like a meteor as he flew straight towards Earth Tianyi. There were no illusory changes in his flight. It was just that direct, but it was a display of absolute speed. It was too fast. In the next moment, Ji Dong had already arrived in front of Earth Tianyi and punched out again. Yellow ripples once again spread from Earth Tianyi's 3 eyes. Then its huge body twisted and suddenly caved in front of Ji Dong. When Ji Dong punched out and his arm was about to straighten, its shrunken body suddenly trembled. A thick Earth Tianyi aura surged out like layers of waves and collided with Ji Dong's fist. With a loud bang, Earth Tianyi's huge body flew out brazenly. However, the soul seal it had sent out did not have any effect this time. What a joke! With Ji Dong's soul cultivation at the peak of the martial saint level, how could he give G2 Tianyi a second chance after the first successful sneak attack? Given Earth Tianyi's cultivation, it was impossible to compete with him in terms of soul force. When Earth Tianyi's body was sent flying, it had already started to change. Black light replaced its original dark gray color. Clearly, the 9th Water Empress was the direction of its transformation. However, at this moment, a special wave suddenly appeared on Ji Dong's body. His eyes flashed with golden light, and Earth Tianyi's transformation actually failed. After the halo disappeared, it returned to its fat body, and Ji Dong appeared in front of it in the next moment. He punched from above and sent Earth Tianyi flying. Although Earth Tianyi's defense was amazing, its body, which only had the magic power of a middle-level martial sage, still couldn't withstand Ji Dong's attack. Li Yonghao's heart was filled with shock. As the controller of the 10 transformations Heavenly Stem Sacred Extermination Formation, no one knew better than him why Earth Tianyi's transformation failed. The reason was very simple, because at that moment, the air had lost all the 9th water magical power. The Empress was a 9th water totem divine beast and did not have the support of the 9th water magical power. How could it succeed in its transformation? Although the ninth water magical power in the air was instantly extracted, it still had the ninth water magical power. However, at that moment, it couldn't exert its ninth water magical power at all. As a result, the transformation of the 10 transformations Heavenly Stem Sacred Extermination Formation naturally couldn't be achieved. However, Earth Tiany's defense was indeed amazing. After clashing head-on with Ji Dong and being punched down, its defense still protected the entire formation. At this moment, Li Yonghao couldn't care less about anything else. He once again urged Earth Tiany to transform, and this time, the target was the 7th metal white tiger. Ji Dong began to attack. He was much stronger than Li Yonghao had expected. Under such circumstances, Li Yonghao could only choose to deal with the 7th metal white tiger that he was most familiar with and best at. Otherwise, he knew that he wouldn't stand a chance. However, just as Earth Tiany began to transform again, and only needed 1 second to complete the attribute switch, Ji Dong's eyes lit up again. The Heavenly Stem Divine Beast transformation of the 10 transformations Heavenly Stem Sacred Extermination Formation had failed again. It was still Earth Tiany, and because of the failure of the transformation, its body was still delayed for a while. While Li Yonghao was shocked, the only thing he could do was to increase the falling force of Earth Tiany, hoping that the distance would give him time to react. He didn't understand how Ji Dong did it, but he had no other choice at this time. At this moment, Earth Tiany's falling body suddenly stopped, as if a wall had suddenly appeared in the air. It forcibly blocked its path, and Earth Tiany's plump body obviously paused in midair, while Ji Dong's foot had already chopped down like a battle axe. There was another roar, and Earth Tiany wailed miserably, and its body accelerated again. However, after falling for less than 10 meters, it was blocked by an invisible wall again. It didn't even have the chance to fight back, let alone transform. Ji Dong turned around, his right hand forming a fist and his left hand forming a claw. This time, he had no intention of giving his opponent any chance. The red left claw quietly slashed across Earth Tiany's body, instantly freezing its body. At the same time, Ji Dong's eyes lit up again, and he once again interrupted Earth Tiany's attempt to transform. Next, Ji Dong's hands were like illusory lightning, hitting Earth Tiany's body 6 times in a row. It was the 6-fold killing curse that he had invented. That's right, the body of the Heavenly Stem Divine Beast condensed by the 10 transformations Heavenly Stem Sacred Extermination Formation contained magic of all attributes. This was also the reason why Earth Tiany's defense was so strong. When Ji Dong's ultimate dual fire attributes entered his body, it would be dissolved by this magic of all attributes. The defense of the 5 elements yin-yang world was already very strong, let alone the 10 transformations Heavenly Stem Sacred Extermination Formation. However, every formation had its own limit. Ji Dong's 6-fold killing curse was one of his most powerful means of attack. Moreover, he was no longer the Ji Dong of the past. Not only had his magic improved to the high level of the saint level, but his body had also improved to the peak of the saint level. More importantly, his god-killing strike had broken through to the 7th level, and he had the extremely overbearing and powerful supplementary skill of the god-killing thunder. After completing the last attack of the 6-fold killing curse, Ji Dong stomped on Earth Tiany's body, and he was trampled down like a cannonball, heavily bombarding the ground below. Immediately after, a huge black and white pillar of fire soared into the sky and dyed the entire sky that color. 10 figures were sent flying along with their magical beasts, and they were thrown hundreds of meters away from the center of the explosion like petals. All of them fell to the ground in a sorry state, and all of them vomited blood. The bones of their mounts were all broken, and it seemed like they wouldn't be able to survive. This was the result of Ji Dong showing mercy. He hadn't used his full strength when he had used the 6-fold killing curse. Although he had used the god-killing thunder, he had only infused 70% of his mana. Otherwise, the Darkness Heavenly Stem Saints would have been killed instantly. However, even 70% of their mana was enough to make the bodies of the Darkness Heavenly Stem Saints suffer an unprecedentedly strong blow, and all of them were severely injured. Ji-dong floated quietly in the sky. The battle was over, and everything was peaceful again. At that moment, he was floating in the sky like an unshakable demon god. In the eyes of the darkness, heavenly stem saints, he was an insurmountable barrier. Ji-dong looked at the scattered darkness, heavenly stem saints below, and shook his head. You guys aren't sage-grade powerhouses after all. Although the 10 transformation heavenly stem sacred extermination array is good, the sage-grade powerhouses that you guys condense are only pseudo-sage grade. Do you really think that this array formation can shake the darkness heavenly secret? There might still be a chance if all of you can break through to the low-level sage grade. Li Yonghao, there are actually many flaws in your array formation. As the leader of the array formation, Li Yonghao suffered the heaviest injuries. He fell to the ground heavily, and he didn't even need to look to know that his mount, the Black Dragon, was finished. His divine weapon was broken, and his mount was dead. At that moment, he could be said to have fallen to the lowest point. More importantly, he suffered a mental blow. He spat out another mouthful of blood, but he still struggled to get up from the ground. Although the other darkness heavenly stem saints were also severely injured, most of the attacks have been borne by their mounts. Hence, their situation wasn't too bad, and they also managed to get up from the ground. However, their eyes were filled with confusion as they looked at Ji-dong. The man in front of them was as invincible as the darkness heavenly secret. Their greatest trump card had been destroyed so easily. We've lost, Li Yonghao said in shock. His voice was trembling as blood continued to seep out of his 7 orifices. Although these injuries were not fatal with his cultivation, it would take at least 3 months for him to recover. 3 months was more than enough time for the sacred battle to come to an end. He knew that from that moment on. He had become an outsider in the sacred battle, and he no longer stood a chance. Ji-dong said to Li Yonghao, "Since you've admitted defeat, please keep your promise with your partners." Li Yonghao nodded with much difficulty. "I will, but want to know how you did it just now. Even if we're only pseudo-saint tier, like you said, that's still mid-saint tier demonic energy. I don't understand how you managed to destroy the most important transformation profundity of my 10 elemental heavenly stem sacred destruction formation. If you could continue to transform and make use of the characteristics and attributes of the 10 elemental heavenly stem divine beasts, I believe that even if you could defeat us, it wouldn't be that easy." Ji-dong looked at Li Yonghao and said indifferently, "You guys don't stand a chance. Not from the beginning to the end. The reason is very simple. I have a skill that naturally restrains your 10 elemental heavenly stem sacred destruction formation. I'm not afraid to tell you that this is one of the abilities of my demon domain, called the elemental stripping demon domain. When your 10 elemental heavenly stem sacred destruction formation transforms, it naturally requires demonic energy to be converted. Although your origins are of all 10 attributes, the moment the formation transforms into the heavenly stem divine beasts, the 10 elemental demonic energy must be converted through the rotation of the 5 elements into the attribute of the heavenly stem divine beast. Am I right?" Li Yonghao nodded and muttered, "The elemental stripping demon domain?" Ji-dong nodded and said, "Yes, the elemental stripping demon domain. The transformation of your 10 elemental heavenly stem sacred destruction formation can be said to be fast, but no matter how fast it is, it's still a conversion between different attributes." Chapter 670. The dark heavenly stem saints listened to Ji-dong's cold and cruel voice calmly. During the process of changing your attributes, there will always be an extremely short process. There will always be an extremely short process in between. With my soul cultivation that is completely above yours, it won't be difficult for me to find this short process. Every type of ultimate 5 elements has its own unique aura and radiance. Well, I found that short process. I just had to use the elemental stripping demon domain according to the attribute you wanted to change. Then, you wouldn't have a chance. The entire demon domain's transformation process would instantly stop because I removed the attribute that I wanted to change. I think you already felt that way at that time, right? It's the same for the next few times. As for stopping your bodies from falling, It's a skill of mine called the God-destroying wall. It can create a wall of air within a certain range without any aura, and it can block to a certain extent. Although this skill doesn't have any offensive capabilities, it's ever-changing in actual combat. With these two abilities, even if my cultivation is slightly weaker, you still won't be able to contend against me. Without being able to change your attributes, the greatest mystery of the 10 transformations, sacred destruction formation, will disappear, and naturally, it won't be able to pose any threat to me. Li Yonghao's face turned paler and paler as he listened to Ji Dong's explanation. When he heard what Ji Dong had to say, his body was already on the verge of collapse. Li Yonghao's body was on the verge of collapse. It was Scorpion who rushed over to hold his body so that Li Yonghao did not fall. But you already have a demon domain. Why is there another demon domain that condenses fire elements? That's impossible. A demon master can only have a demon's domain. Even the saints of the light sect are no exception, unless you're a magical beast and have an innate skill. Li Yonghao's voice was still filled with indignation. The 10 transformations sacred destruction formation was something that he had painstakingly perfected for more than 10 years. He couldn't accept the fact that it had been broken by Ji Dong so easily. Ji Dong said indifferently, "There are many things in this world that are not absolute. It's the same for a demon master to only have one demon domain." As he spoke, his figure flashed, and he landed on the ground 10 meters away from Li Yonghao. Seeing Ji Dong suddenly approaching, Scorpion immediately became vigilant. Her delicate body moved, and she had already blocked in front of Ji Dong. There were many complicated emotions in her beautiful eyes, but at this moment, she did not know what to say to Ji Dong. Ji Dong didn't look at the Scorpion. He looked straight into Li Yonghao's eyes and continued, "Ordinary demon masters, even us heavenly stem saints, can only have one demon domain." That was true. However, I'm different from ordinary heavenly stem saints. Have you forgotten? I'm a saint with 2 attributes. Back when I broke through to the 8 crowns, I already had 2 mana domains. The reason why I have one more demon domain than ordinary magicians is because I also have one more attribute. However, I can tell you that I don't only have 2 infernal domains. To be precise, the one I dealt with just now was my 3rd infernal domain. 3rd infernal domain? Li Yonghao's eyes widened. Because of the agitation in his heart, the injuries that had just stabilized showed signs of relapse. There was blood oozing from his mouth and nose. Dark First Wood Saint hurriedly treated him. At this time, the other dark heavenly stem saints also basically gathered around Li Yonghao. They looked at Ji Dong with a more complicated gaze than Li Yonghao. Everyone knew that no matter how Ji Dong treated them, this holy war had nothing to do with them. Their mounts were dead, and their hatred for Ji Dong could be said to have reached the extreme. However, what could they do? They could only glare at Ji Dong. Glares can't kill people. Ji Dong nodded and said, "Yes, it's the 3rd infernal domain." "That's right, it's the 3rd demon area. According to my control, I can instantly strip any kind of magic power within a certain range. Isn't it the perfect counter to your 10 transformations sacred extermination formation?" Li Yonghao smiled bitterly and said, "Then where did your 3rd infernal domain come from? Did it appear out of thin air? Don't tell me you have a 3rd attribute." Ji Dong smiled indifferently. "Of course I don't have a 3rd attribute. My 3rd infernal domain was branded. As for how it came to be, I don't need to tell you. Now, our battle is over. Everyone, rest here and recuperate. After the Holy War is over, you still need to clean up the mess of the Dark 5 Elements continent. The Dark 5 Elements continent has been ruined by Dark Heaven's secrets for so many years. It's time for the civilians to recuperate." While speaking, suddenly, the dark heavenly stem saints felt their vision blurred. Ji Dong's figure suddenly became illusory. Then everyone felt a gentle magic enter their body and fell to the ground one by one. When Ji Dong's figure appeared again, these dark heavenly stem saints had all fallen to the ground. Of course, Ji Dong wouldn't completely trust them. Moreover, they were dark heavenly stem saints with all attributes. Maybe they had some secret method to quickly recover. At this time, not only were their magic sealed by Jidong, but their souls were also sealed. They wouldn't wake up without a month's time. A green light flickered, and Qin Sichuan had already arrived at Jidong's side. Her perfect and delicate face was filled with a smile. Her perfect and delicate face was still gentle. She pulled Jidong's big hand and said, "Let's go." "Okay." While agreeing, Jidong's expression suddenly changed. He said in a deep voice, "Oh no, we have to hurry to the front line. Senior sent a message. The Radiant Army can't hold it anymore." With his current cultivation, he didn't need to hold the 10,000-mile sound transmission stone in his hand. He just needed to feel it. Jidong took Qin Sichuan and soared into the sky at the same time. They turned into two flowing lights and disappeared in the air. Holy Evil Island. Between the Dark Heavenly Stem Army and the Radiant Army, except for the battle between the two Dragon Emperors, the first attack was actually a test. However, the 5 elements mutual generation formation of the Radiant Army's Devil Masters really surprised the Dark Heavenly Stem Army. That was why they suffered a big loss. Thousands of Devil Masters died in the beginning. Choosing to attack with 3rd Fire Devil Force was not just because the attack power of the 3rd Fire Devil Force was great. After all, the target was a 5 elements boundary with all attributes. One had to say that Ji Yunsheng was far-sighted. There is another important reason why he let the Light Devil Masters choose to use 3rd Fire Devil Force, and that was the Red Lotus Heavenly Fire. Although the Red Lotus Heavenly Fire had dissipated, the fire elements in the air were still extremely strong. In this way, attacking with Fire Devil Force would naturally produce a certain bonus. Relatively speaking, the 5 elements boundary on the side of the Dark Heavenly Stem Army did not have this benefit. Therefore, when the two sides fell into a stalemate, at least on the surface, it turned out that the Radiant Army, whose overall strength was far weaker than the opponent, was suppressing the Dark Heavenly Stem Army. After a short period of shock, the Dark Heavenly Stem Army gradually stabilized. After all, they were well trained under the high pressure of Dark Heavenly Secrets. They quickly integrated the strength of the various 1,000-man teams. The coordination of the 5 elements boundary gradually became solid. After all, they had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers. After stabilizing the formation, Dark Heavenly Secrets did not order a full-scale attack, and instead just fought with each other. In Dark Heavenly Secrets' view, those Light Devil Masters must have consumed a lot of their own energy to attack from such a long distance, and they couldn't hold on for long at all. When their mana was exhausted, it would naturally be a one-sided massacre. Therefore, the Air Force was not in a hurry to advance, and just fought with the Light Devil Army. However, things did not go as planned. As time passed, Dark Heavenly Secrets began to gradually frown. The attacks launched by the Light Devil Army from such a long distance did not seem to weaken as time went by. They still maintained the previous attacks without weakening. On the contrary, the Dark Demon Army's defense had begun to have some problems under the continuous consumption of mana. This situation was something that Dark Heavenly Secrets and the Dark Demon Army did not expect. Judging from the mana fluctuations emitted by both sides at the beginning, they could naturally feel that the overall strength of the Light Devil Army was far inferior to theirs. How could they persist for so long? And it was a single attribute attack with continuous mana. Lord Divinity, I'm afraid that those Light Demon Masters are relying on some kind of formation. Otherwise, their mana would have been exhausted long ago. We must take action. Otherwise, if their mana continues until our Light Demon Masters run out of mana, it will be troublesome. A purple-robed high priest whispered in Dark Heavenly Secrets' ear. Dark Heavenly Secrets nodded and said, "In that case, let's launch an all-out attack. Order the Air Force to launch and, at the same time, cover the ground. Increase the combat distance of the Air Force, and the Dark Demon Army on the ground will attack with full force. Suppress the enemy from returning to the sky." "Yes." The group of purple-robed high priests responded loudly. The Dark Demon Army was finally going all out. While the Dark Demon Army was bewildered, the Radiant Army was not having a good time either. After all, the individual strength of the Light Devil Masters was much weaker than that of the Dark Demon Army. Even with the support of the five-element cycle formation, their consumption was still continuing. After nearly 2 hours of attacking and defending each other, the rich fire element brought by the Red Lotus heavenly fire had gradually thinned. The attack that seemed to have not weakened on the surface was actually a drop in the bucket. And at this moment, the Dark Demon Army suddenly moved. The Dark Demon Army on the ground, which was originally just defending in place, began to move forward. The Dark Demon King in the sky was also like a giant beast, pouncing towards the Radiant Army's Air Force. When launching, the Air Force of the Dark Demon Army had obviously increased their altitude, and they were almost diving towards the Radiant Army. Although the Dark Dragon Emperor's claw had been destroyed by the Radiant Dragon Emperor, the Wound had already recovered. Although it affected him greatly, he was still a saint-rank powerhouse. Ji Yunqing's forehead was already covered with a fine layer of sweat. Although he was an excellent commander, it was also the first time he was commanding a battle of such a scale. From the previous battle situation, he could judge that there was a huge difference in strength between the two sides. If the Dark Demon Army really broke through the camp of the Light Devil Masters, he was afraid that the other party would soon drive straight in. The holy war between the two continents was not the same as ordinary wars. Due to the existence of many powerful and destructive Devil Masters, once the line of defense was broken, the other party's killing would follow. It would not be long before this holy war would present a one-sided situation. Order the army to retreat and return to the fortress. Rely on the fortress to defend and the Devil Master Legion to bring up the rear. All the Devil Masters and the seniors of the Elders' Council, we should also prepare for battle. We can only rely on the fortress to defend. Ji Yunqing made a prompt decision after a short period of consideration. It was definitely not wise to clash head-on with the other party's army on the plains. The five empires of the Radiant Continent had spent a huge amount of resources on the Radiant Fortress. The fortress was extremely sturdy, and a large number of magical metals and crystals were used for attribute reinforcement. Its defense was extremely strong. In the current situation, they had to withdraw to the fortress first. Hey, even if we have to withdraw, we have to teach them a lesson first. The chrysanthemum pig's voice echoed in everyone's ears. Then, this would attribute holy beast, the only remaining little fat pig among the 5 holy beasts of the holy evil island, rose into the air. The chrysanthemum pig's body was usually only a little more than a foot long, which was extremely inconspicuous on such a vast battlefield. At this time, it rose slightly, but did not attract the attention of the other party at all. Then, the chrysanthemum pig suddenly opened its mouth, as if to swallow the world, and suddenly took a deep breath. The leaders of the Light Army only felt that the surrounding air suddenly fluctuated violently, and like rivers flowing into the sea, they swarmed into the chrysanthemum pig's mouth. Then, they saw the chrysanthemum pig's body suddenly expand as if blown by air. Its body, which was originally only a little more than a foot long, had expanded to a length of 5 meters in the blink of an eye, followed by 10 meters, 20 meters, 30 meters, 50 meters, all the way to 100 meters. Its size was far larger than the 2 dragon emperors in the air. At this time, the chrysanthemum pig looked crystal clear, as if carved out of green jade. Its incomparably huge body was immediately noticed by the other party's Dark Demon Army. The chrysanthemum pig's small eyes had become a lot larger with the expansion of its body. The most exaggerated thing was its stomach, which was like a huge ball. The next moment, with a puff, a vast stream of air had been spat out from the chrysanthemum pig's mouth. This stream of air was not the air it had swallowed before, but an incomparably huge green beam of light. This green beam of light was full of life, but it was not oppressive at all.